Chapter 598. You're back. The moment they landed, they saw Milo sitting on the sofa in a suit, smiling warmly at them as if he had been waiting for a long time. That was fast. Little Ing is indeed Little Ing. She found the spirit seed so quickly. You gave him access to the divine realm. Lone Moon turned to look at Shining. Shining nodded. The last time. Lone Moon frowned, even Chef's expression darkened. Were they that close? Milo put down the tea in his hand and walked over, still smiling warmly. His gaze swept across the child hugging a flower pot at the side, stunned. The spirit seed has transformed so quickly. As he spoke, he reached over. But the little spirit seed suddenly took a step back and avoided his hand. It slipped behind Lone Moon and looked warily at the person in front of it. It even tugged at Lone Moon's robe. Daddy. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He directly pulled it out from behind him and pointed at Milo. This is your daddy. The little spirit seed was stunned. It glanced at Lone Moon and then at Milo, not knowing what to do. Shining at the side stepped forward and said, Flower, what's the result? Milo's face stiffened. Little Ing, can't you call me by my real name? No. He sighed and gave her a really helpless look. He shrugged and said, I've already asked, but I didn't get much information. The other party doesn't seem to know much either. So. Shen Ying's eyes narrowed. You came empty-handed. Milo stiffened and smiled even more brightly. Little Ing, don't say that. At least I've confirmed that your previous guess was not wrong. That is indeed real. Is that so? Shining suddenly smiled. Flower, we haven't seen each other for so long. Have you forgotten what I said before? No. Milo paled. Wait. Lone Moon was getting more and more confused. He could not help but interrupt. What are the two of you talking about? Why did it sound like a deal had failed? Shining took a deep breath and turned to the two. Wait a moment, I'll fulfill my previous promise. What promise? Before the two of them could react, Shining was already walking toward them. Suddenly, it was as if a huge aura filled the entire divine realm. She directly grabbed Milo's collar and walked towards the empty space in front. Wait a minute, Little Ing. Are you for real? Milo's originally perfect and gentle smile instantly collapsed completely. His eyes widened in fear. What do you want to do? You promised Sister Jing that you wouldn't hit me. What you're doing isn't right, Little Ing. How could you bear to hurt me? We are your only classmates. Little Ing, I was wrong. I was really wrong. But she doesn't know and there's nothing I can do. Ayaya, ouch, ouch, ouch. Calm down, Little Ing. Wait, you can't kick there. Shining seemed to be so angry that she punched him again and again. She was very serious, and she purposely aimed at her opponent's face. Even the entire divine realm rumbled and shook. Milo's elegance and gentleness were all gone. For a moment, the entire divine realm was filled with his tragic cries of pain. Lone Moon, the spectator who didn't know the truth, stared blankly. He glanced at the person who was beaten up beyond recognition and couldn't help but nudge Chef beside him. He subconsciously asked, don't you think that Shining is beating him a little too hard? They were classmates after all. I don't think so. I Ching answered without hesitation. Then, he directly went over and took out a sword. Master, you'll hurt your hand easily if you keep doing this. Why don't you use a sword? Lone Moon, Chef was hitting him when he was down, wasn't he? Definitely. Indeed, when dealing with a love rival, even the most principled people would abandon their morals. He had to say that chef was really too much. Hence, he directly took out his storage bag and handed it over. If you don't have enough swords, I still have more here. Don't stand on ceremony, please beat him to death. Milo, are you all demons? Oh, greater than over equal to. Shen Ying's one-sided beating lasted for a whole hour. Seeing that the entire divine realm was about to collapse, she finally stopped. Mili's face was already swollen like a pig's head. There wasn't a single piece of undamaged skin on his body. He lay on the ground and looked at the three of them with tears in his eyes. As he sobbed, he groaned disgustingly. Little Ing, I've been completely sincere to you. How can you bear to treat me like this? Shen Ying's expression turned cold. She snorted. Is your skin still itchy? It's not itchy anymore, it's not itchy anymore. His whole body trembled. He immediately kept that disgusting expression and sucked in air. You're still as violent as before. You beat me up whenever you don't agree with me. He suddenly stopped mid-sentence. He reached out and touched his seriously deformed face. He took out a mirror from somewhere and looked at himself. Instantly, he let out a scream. Ah! My face! His expression changed. Instantly, he looked like the sky was falling. As he touched that pig's head, he pointed angrily at the few of them and said, You, how can you bear to hurt my beautiful face? Lone Moon, I Ching, damn it. They wanted to hit him too. What was going on? Little Ing, you're too much. You're jealous. You're actually targeting my face. Perhaps because he was beaten into his original form, Milo no longer looked like the elegant young master he was just now. He completely let go of his true nature. He took out a small white instrument from somewhere. As he looked at himself in the mirror, he nervously repaired that pig's head. You're injured so badly. I don't know how many hours it'll take to heal. I can only cover it up. Little Ing, do you have any concealer? Shut up. Shining glared at him. If you don't have any concealer, foundation will do. Do you want to die? He then regretfully shut his mouth. He turned and took out a huge makeup bag. He began to fiddle with it. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He could not help but look at Shining. Will he always be like this? Shining nodded. She thought of something and added, usually he'll be like this after he loses his disguise. Before he loses his disguise, he can still pretend. Indeed, the people from the management committee are a bunch of lunatics. Shining seemed to think of something. Her expression darkened. In the past, when we went out on missions in school, he would often hide in a corner to touch up his makeup halfway through. Not only did he make her have to finish the task of 2 people, she even had to go back and fish him up. Yet she had no choice but to fish him up. He turned around and snitched on her sister. The reason she could graduate from the management committee so quickly was partly because she was disgusted by him. Then what was the promise that Master mentioned just now? I Ching could not help but ask. Shen Ying's expression darkened. After a while, she said word by word, when I graduated, I swore that I would beat him up every time I see him. She still owed him a beating previously. She would beat him up again when his face recovered. I Ching, Lone Moon, alright, this was very Shining. Lone Moon was starting to doubt the words of those people from the management committee. These two did not seem to be in love with each other. They seemed to be enemies. It was not easy for Milo to survive until now. Chapter 599. Milo touched up his makeup for a whole 2 hours, and was even flattered halfway through, before he hurriedly used his assistant's ability to heal the wounds on his face. He even complained along the way that it would be bad for his skin, so much that Lone Moon wanted to beat him up again. It could be said that after taking off that layer of suave young master skin, he had completely let go of himself. To put it nicely, he had returned to being an exquisite boy, suddenly wanted to light a candle for the manager of his plane. He doesn't have a manager. Shining replied casually. What? Lone Moon and I Ching were stunned, an assistant without a manager. The two were about to ask, when Shining had already stepped forward, kicked the person on the ground and asked, What exactly did you tell my sister? What else could I say? Milu protected his face like a baby. Before answering, I just told her honestly about that big Dao organization you mentioned the last time. You told my sister. Shining clenched her fists. No, no. He hurriedly added, taking a step back. How could I say it was you? I could only say that I encountered it. She asked around and said that there was no monitor there, but she did not tell me what the monitor was exactly. Shining frowned, scanning Milo from head to toe. The other party trembled, immediately covering his face and took a step back. Stop hitting me. He hurriedly said, You know your sister too. If she doesn't want to say, no one can ask her. I've already tried my best. It's not a breach of contract. Breach of contract? Lone Moon was stunned for a moment, exchanging a look with Chef. Did Shining go to the end of the void to find the spirit seed, just to let Milu ask Shinjing about the monitor? How scared was he of his sister? What use do I have you? Shining rolled her eyes. I've always been this useless. Milu replied with a, Is this the first day you know me? Expression, not ashamed but proud. She wanted to hit him even more. All right, things are already like this. At most I'll send more boxes of cosmetics to Littling in the future as compensation. How about that? Get lost. You damn sissy. All right, then I'll get lost. Milu very sensibly turned and opened the plane gate. He thought for a moment and turned back to walk in Lone Moon's direction. Then I'll take the spirit seed away first. As he spoke, he reached out to grab the child with the spirit seed, but the child suddenly dodging his hand and hiding behind Lone Moon's back. He looked at Milu warily and unhappily, then raised his head to look at Lone Moon and said pitifully, Daddy, I don't want to go with him. Lone Moon sighed and squatted down to touch his head. Be good, be good. You belong to his world. Go back with him. No. Perhaps because Milu was only an assistant and not a manager, the child was not close to him. And it seemed to be scared out of its wits for a moment, even throwing away the flower pot containing the garlic demon. Once again avoiding Mili's hand, it turned and ran towards Shining, hugging her leg and crying out loud, Wah! I don't want to go. Don't throw me away. Was he trying to pin it on them? Why is it even more disobedient after transforming? Mila sighed and had no choice but to turn and walk over. You're making me look like a human trafficker. Mommy. Mommy. The spirit seed cried even more sadly, clutching tightly onto the corner of Xin Ying's clothes. Mommy. Daddy. Mila paused, his eyes widened in shock as he swept a glance at Shining and Lone Moon. His eyes narrowed for a moment before he said in a voice that was full of twists and turns, Oh, no wonder you don't dare to ask Sister Jing personally. So it's... Lone Moon and Yi Qing's faces darkened at the same time. You can get lost now. Don't let your imagination run wild. All right. His gaze became even more ambiguous as he pushed Lone Moon and said, I'll just ask one thing, is your third leg all right? Lone Moon, Shining, Chef had already pulled out his sword, indeed it was better to kill him. I'm leaving. Seeing that the few of them were about to fly into a rage, Milu immediately walked over quickly, reaching out to grab the child's hand and was just about to drag him away. Wait! Shining suddenly reached out to stop him. What's the matter? Milu faltered, his eyes curved as he thought of something. Can't bear to part with a handsome man like me. Shen Ying's expression darkened. You can leave, but he can't. Why? He was stunned. You're not going back on your word, are you? Hey, little Ing, you can't do this. Even if you're jealous of my beauty, you can't keep the spirit seed, this isn't a joke. Who said I was joking with you? Shen Ying's eyes narrowed as she looked down at the child who was still clutching tightly onto the corner of her clothes, crying so hard that he was hiccuping. We agreed before that you'd help me figure out the matters regarding monitors, I'd help you find the spirit seed. In the end you didn't complete it, so the deal wasn't made. Little Ing. He frowned and said with some seriousness, you clearly know how important the spirit seed is to the plane, and he's already transformed now. If he leaves the plane for too long, I'm afraid there will be unforeseen changes, he can't stay. What if I insist on keeping him? Little Ing. Milu was getting anxious. His sentience hasn't fully matured, it's only because you're managers that he wants to get close to you, you can't be emotional. Oh. She reached out to touch the child's head and continued, but I'm not a manager. Ha. He faltered for a moment, something flashed across his face, but he immediately recovered and frowned. What are you talking about? Sister Jing told me long ago that you took over the plane, how can you not be a manager? Anyway, he can't stay here, he has to go back with me immediately. Shen Ying's expression darkened. What if I insist on not giving it? Little Ing, don't mess around. Some anger appeared on Mi Li's face. After a while he thought of something, he raised his voice and threatened, if you really do that, then I can only tell Sister Jing everything, don't blame me. Shen Ying's expression darkened, she stared straight at him and did not speak for a long while. Mi Li's expression became even more smug, he smiled and said, all right little Ing, stop messing around, directly give the spirit, so, this has something to do with my sister too. Shen Ying suddenly said. Ha. Milu faltered. You didn't ask my sister about monitors at all. Shen Ying's expression darkened even more, she stared straight into his eyes and said, no. I should say from the start, you didn't want me to contact my sister. This can only be possible, this so-called monitor is also related to me. Milu stiffened, the spirit seed is indeed not yours, your motive is also not entirely for him. Shen Ying pushed the child towards the two people behind her, took a step forward and said, Milu, you tricked us into going to the end of the void, what exactly do you want? He stood rooted to the ground, the teasing and giggling expression on his face disappearing instantly. After a while, he sighed and said helplessly, little Ing. How can you trick me like this? Indeed, it was too difficult to lie to a top student. Actually, you don't have to say any more. Shen Ying raised her hand to stop him from speaking, said directly, anyway, what you're saying isn't the truth, I'll ask directly. With that said, she directly opened the communication device on her wristband. Ha! Chapter 600. Wait, little Ing. Milu paled, he wanted to stop her but it was too late, Shen Ying directly called Shen Jing. Almost in the next second, a light screen popped up, a face that looked 80% similar to Shen Ying's appeared on it. Little Ing, what's the matter? It's rare to see you contact me on your own. Shen Jing's voice came instantly, she swept a glance over, her gaze froze when she saw Milu at the side, then after a while, it melted again. Yo, Hua is here too. Are you guys having a class reunion? Hi Sister Jing. Milu raised his hand shakily, his smile a little forced. Sister, can you come over when you're free? Shen Ying said directly. I have something to ask you in person. Why are you? Shenjing was just about to ask what happened when she glanced at Milo, seeming to have thought of something. Her expression changed before she said, "All right, wait for me, I'll come over right away." The screen flashed and turned off immediately. Mili's face paled even more. "You guys chat, I'll go back first." With that said, he immediately turned to open the plane gate, but was pulled back by Shening. "What's the hurry? Little Ing, don't be like this. You'll really die." Mili's entire being was not good, he looked like he was about to cry. "Your sister will really beat me to death." But it was already too late. A white light flashed in front of them. Shenjing directly walked out of the plane gate. "Little Ing, why?" Before she could finish, in the next moment, Milo was like a wild horse out of control, breaking free from Shenying's hand in the next moment, charging towards Shenjing. Then with a bang, he knelt on the ground with all his limbs on the ground, his voice sonorous and loud, "Sister Jing, I was wrong." Lone Moon, Qing, Shening, this strong desire to live. Shenjing lowered her head and glanced at him. She asked instinctively, "Is your leg broken?" Mila shuddered, then chuckled as he replied, "No, no, no, Sister Jing. I just feel that looking at you while kneeling, you look especially beautiful." "Really?" The three of them. Where's his integrity? What happened? Shenjing looked up at Shening and the others. The few of them exchanged glances before Shening stepped forward and asked, "Big sister, do you know what a monitor is?" Shenjing was shocked and her eyes widened. "How did you know?" She thought of something and lowered her head to look at Milo. "What did you say?" Mila shuddered violently and lay lower. "He tricked us into going to the Void Land." Shening replied. "Land of the Void." Shenjing thought for a moment. After a while, she thought of something and glared at the person on the ground. Her eyes instantly turned red and she said word by word, "You tricked her into participating in the qualification trial." For a moment, the surrounding air stagnated. It was as if some terrifying energy had swept across the entire deity realm. Shenjing seemed to have been ignited, and her anger immediately burned fiercely. The entire god territory shook, and the ground started to crack inch by inch, as if it would collapse in the next moment. Calm down, calm down. Sister Jing, listen to me. Isn't she fine now?" Milo advised while shivering. "Being angry isn't good for the body. It's easy to get wrinkles. Besides, this is her god territory, Sister Jean." "Sister." Seeing that the god territory was about to collapse, Shening couldn't help but call out. Shenjing's anger was then suppressed a little. She picked up the person on the ground and waved her hand to open a special door. She said, "You guys wait for half an hour first. We'll talk when you come back." With that said, she dragged Milo inside. Seeing that the door was about to close, they could faintly hear Mili's trembling voice begging for mercy. "Sister Jing, please, don't hit my face." Oh, in the next moment, the door had already closed. Only a faint aura of chaos was left at the scene. Lone Moon and I Ching, they were indeed sisters, weren't they? Even the way they beat people up was so similar. Shening, the door that Sister Jing opened just now. Lone Moon couldn't help but ask, "Don't tell me it leads to chaos." Shening nodded. Lone Moon stiffened. Why could she open the entrance to chaos so easily? When he took over the plane previously, he had already used all his strength to deal with a beast of chaos. They were both managers, but the difference was too big. Indeed, they were from a cheat family. Shenjing said to wait for half an hour, but they waited for a whole hour for each other. Neither of them had come out of chaos. Yet the entire divine realm fluctuated from time to time. Even the two plane trees shook from time to time, as if they were hit by something. What's more, the flow of time in chaos was different from that of the plane. The few of them didn't dare to think how long Shinjing had beaten Milo up for. Anyway, 2 hours later, they saw Shinjing open the door of chaos once again and walk back. She had already changed her clothes, but they didn't see the other person behind her. "Where's Milo?" Lone Moon asked subconsciously. "What? Are you very concerned about him?" Shinjing's cold gaze swept over instantly. Lone Moon stiffened instantly. He immediately stood in line. "No. No." Shinjing then turned and sat on the sofa that was conjured. She drank a mouthful of tea before replying, "Humph. That bastard won't die for now." "Sister, what exactly is a monitor?" Shining also sat down and asked, "Why did Huahua trick me into going to Void Land? What's the qualification trial you were talking about?" She frowned instantly and turned to look at Shining with a look of exasperation. Her anger instantly burned over. "You too. Didn't you always hate him the most when you were young? Why did you go just because he asked you to? Do you have any brains?" Shining habitually cowered. "I was wrong. Luckily this time I didn't really trigger the trial, otherwise." Her expression darkened, as if thinking of something dangerous. Her palm tightened, and with a crack, the teacup in her hand instantly turned into powder. "Sister Jing." Lone Moon couldn't help but ask. "Then what exactly is a monitor?" Her gaze darkened. After a while, she sighed and said slowly, "A monitor is a monitor of the plane management. A person in charge of monitoring and judging the actions of the various plane managers." Monitor managers. The three of them were shocked at the same time. "Why?" Shinjing laughed. "Do you think that managers are invincible? Monitors are the only people who can infinitely pass through various planes, and will not be repelled by any plane." She continued. "The ability of a monitor is usually above that of a manager. They are not responsible for the stability of the plane, but only for assessing the actions of each manager. Planes cannot invade each other. Managers can chase out invaders and maintain the stability of the plane. But if the invader is also a manager, then the situation is different." She frowned. "And the manager and the plane are symbiotic. As long as the plane is not destroyed, the manager will not die. Not every plane will be invaded. After a long life, there will always be a few who want to create trouble. The existence of monitors is to limit such situations." Shinjing explained. "If we say that the manager exists to maintain the stability of the plane, then monitors exist to maintain the stability of the manager. They are responsible for monitoring and examining all the managers, and when there are intrusions, they will intervene and help to choose a new manager to succeed." She turned to look at the three of them. "Milo is a monitor." Lone Moon and I Ching were both stunned. "What? That sissy." "Sister." Shining was not surprised. She looked directly at Shinjing and asked, "What about you?" Shinjing was stunned. She laughed softly. "Me too." There would be a beating anyway, so it was better to do it later than earlier. Big Dao organization. Shinjing frowned. "Their allies are all from the immortal spirit plane." "Yes." Lone Moon thought about it carefully before nodding. "Those people's planes are indeed the same as ours, belonging to the immortal spirit plane. That was why they dared to attack those managers in planes that they could not join. Because their powers were similar, it was easier to absorb them. There's actually such an organization." Shinjing's frown deepened. Though she still had planes to manage and it was normal that she did not notice, but why didn't Milo notice either? Could it be because of Little Ing? Thinking of something, she turned to look at Shining. No wonder Mila would trick you into entering the Void Land. What did she mean? The three of them were confused. Under normal circumstances, monitors would not meet each other. She sighed, but her frown deepened. There's a limit to the number of planes we can sense. If there's already an overseer in a certain area, even if there's another person who wants to explore it, they'll subconsciously ignore that area. So it's impossible for two monitors to appear in the same plane area. You mean? Lone Moon faltered and instantly figured something out. Those planes in the Big Tao organization, it's possible that monitors have been there before. That's why you and Mila know nothing about them. She nodded. But there's no one there. Back then, they had seen many managers, but none of them were as terrifyingly strong as Shinjing. Shinjing did not speak, only turning to look at Shining. Shining. Lone Moon faltered. Mila thinks that Shining is a monitor too. She nodded. That's not right. He thought of something and became even more confused. Didn't you say that monitors cannot meet each other? Let's not talk about whether Shining is one or not. What's going on with you and Milu? I knew him before I became a monitor. Then Shining, to be precise, Mila thinks that Little Ing is a trainee monitor. Her voice instantly turned cold as she continued. Little Ying's power is special, different from other managers. Mila probably knew about the Big Tao organization and thought that she also had the possibility of becoming a monitor. That's why he tricked Little Ing into coming to the Void Land to undergo the qualification trial. Only those who passed the test could become true monitors. Just like me back then. The three of them faltered, even Shining was stunned for a moment. She stared straight at her, as if recalling something. She even stopped chewing on her fruit. What exactly is the qualification trial? Chef asked. This varies from person to person. Shinjing's hand holding the cup tightened, her eyes darkened before she continued. Every monitor's trial is different, but even if you're a manager at the start, it's very difficult to pass. Chapter 602. Milo was seriously injured then. Behind him was a bunch of things chasing after him. Shinjing seemed to have recalled some F***ed-up past events, looking like she wanted to return to chaos and beat someone up again. After discovering that I had the qualifications to become a monitor, he stayed and wanted to train me to help him get back at me. Although it wasn't of much use. Just now she was praising him for being strong, now she was stepping on him. What was going on? If not for the fact that he could help me train Little Ing, why would I have kept him? In the end, he even freaking helped her raise him crooked. What kind of stupid training plan did he come up with? None of them were useful. She turned to look at Shining, her eyes instantly filled with sadness, thinking about how cute her Little Ing was back then. Yet now, this must be Mi Li's fault, definitely. Shining felt goosebumps from being stared at. She shifted to the side uncomfortably, almost shouting out loud out of habit, I was wrong. Sigh. She sighed and looked away in disappointment. No matter what, you didn't trigger the trial, so you shouldn't be a monitor. It's just that your powers are indeed strange. Sister Shin, didn't you say that everyone's trial is different? Lone Moon could not help but ask. Perhaps Shin Ying's trial was not at the end of the void. Even if she didn't trigger the trial, it doesn't mean that she's not a monitor, right? And didn't you say before that she's an existence that surpasses managers? Monitors indeed surpass managers, but their powers are also limited. Shinjing said word by word, who do you think I used as the basis for comparison when I gave her the test data back then? His eyes widened. It couldn't be. Of course it was me. Shinjing said naturally. I said she's not a monitor, not because she's not qualified, but because even a monitor can't estimate her data. That's why she's definitely not a monitor. Then, what is she? Lone Moon was stunned. Shenjing turned around. For a moment, everyone's gaze was fixed on a certain person who had already started to quietly nibble on a pastry. This. I want to know too. Shenning, she was just eating a piece of green bean cake. Was there a need to stare at her like that? She felt goosebumps all over her body. She then quietly stuffed the pastry into the spiritual seed's hand and pretended that she had not eaten it. The child was stunned. He stared blankly at the pastry in his hand and immediately smiled brightly at her. All right, I have to go back. Shenjing stood up directly and glanced at Shenning. She reached out and poked her head. Can you be more promising in the future? Ask me directly if you have any problems. Do you have to look for me, that sissy? She was already crooked. What would happen if she continued to be crooked? It's my fault. She muttered a few more words before turning around to open the plane gate. Sister Jing, take care. Lone Moon could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He was just about to rejoice that the great demon king was finally leaving. They had dodged another calamity. At least they did not. Senior, please wait. Chef suddenly spoke up. Lone Moon almost fell over. Chef, what are you doing? Do you want to die? Don't you know it's easier to invite a god and then to send him away? Chef ignored him. He took a step forward and said loudly with cupped fists in a serious manner, Senior. No, Sister Jing. I am Yi Qing, Master Shenying's disciple. Though I have nothing on me, I am fortunate to have my cooking skills. I can ensure that she does not have to worry about food and clothing. I have been in love with Master for a long time. The world is prosperous, but she is the only one in my heart. In this life, I only wish to grow old with her. With that said, he knelt down and said even more seriously in a loud voice, I want to take Master Shenying as my wife. Please grant me my wish, sister. Lone Moon, Shenying, F***CK, isn't this the wrong time to propose at the wrong time? Is he looking for a beating? Or a beating? Or a beating? Lone Moon silently lit a candle for Chef and the Divine Realm, which was about to welcome the third wave of violent demolition. Indeed, in the next moment, Shenjing's face darkened. A faint icy aura swept over her. She directly reached out and picked up the person in front of her. What did you say? Say it again. Which leg do you want to break? Ha! Look at you, even a cannon fodder beastie has more fans than you, and you still want to marry my sister. Chef ignored her low pressure and still said word by word, I am sincere towards Master. Please grant me my wish, sister. Very good. Shenjing took a deep breath and directly turned to open the chaos gate. Then break all three legs together. With that said, she turned to drag the person in. Sister. Shenying panicked and was about to pull the person back. Suddenly, a small figure jumped out from the side. The spirit seed who had been obediently following beside suddenly pulled Shenjing's sleeve and said, Sister, don't bully my second brother. I'll give you some pastries, okay? With that said, he broke half of the pastries he had just received from Shenying and handed it over. Mommy gave it to me. What? Shenjing was stunned and subconsciously took it. But she saw the child turn and run to Lone Moon's side. He handed the remaining half over. Daddy, eat the pastries. Mommy gave it to you. With that said, he smiled happily and pointed in Shenying's direction. Shenjing, wait, what did the child say just now? Mommy? Daddy? Shenjing looked at the child and then at Shenying and Lone Moon. Indeed, she saw a faint connection between the child and the two of them. Could this child really be her nephew? Then this brat called Yi Qing was, didn't Littling say he was her boyfriend the last time? She turned her head and looked at the person she was holding in her hands. Dozens of melodramatic dramas flashed through her mind. Suddenly, she felt that the person in her hands was glowing green. Instantly, her hands became heavy. Seeing that she did not speak for a long time, Qing begged again, "Please sister, say no more." Shenjing suddenly interrupted him and released her grip. "I agree to your matter. I'm sincere." "Ah. Ah." I Ching was stunned. Did he hear wrongly just now? "I understand. You're a good child." With that said, she patted his shoulder. I Ching, who took the card for no reason, what did she mean? Was she not going to fight anymore? She turned and gave Shining a complicated look. "I'll settle the score with you later." She glared at Shining. The next moment, her whole body was filled with icy chi. Instantly, it landed on Lone Moon, who was at the back. Lone Moon felt his whole body go cold. He heard Shenjing say word by word. "As for you." She suddenly retracted her palm. In the next moment, Lone Moon's whole body flew toward her. He was being strangled. "Tell me. How do you want to die, you scumbag?" Lone Moon, Holy shit. What did she mean? Why did she suddenly change people? What has it got to do with me? For all. Chapter 603. Wait. Why me? Lone Moon finally reacted just as he was about to be pulled into the chaos. He turned and shouted, "Shining, hurry and save him." "Ha!" Shining faltered. Her conscience made her step forward and grab her big sister. "Big sister, actually, shut up." Shenjing's anger was instantly transferred to her. "Air." Shenying's hand trembled. "Ow." "All right. What was conscience?" She didn't know. Lone Moon's eyes widened. "Shening, *CK your uncle." "What did you say?" Before Shening could finish, Shenjing's voice turned cold. "Whose uncle are you going to *CK? Lone Moon's entire body stiffened. *CK. He forgot that these two were sisters. "No, big sister Jing. I'm not talking about your uncle, I'm talking about her uncle." "Pooey, although your uncle is the same uncle, I'm definitely not talking about the same uncle." Shenjing's expression darkened even more. She replied with 2 words. "Ha ha." The cold aura around her body intensified. She stepped into the chaos gate. "I'll let you see my uncle now. Listen to my explanation." Seeing that Father Nyo was about to be dragged in, the spirit seed child suddenly rushed out at the critical moment. He said tearfully, "No. Big sister, you're so pretty. Don't hurt my dad, alright?" Shenjing stopped in her tracks. She turned back to look at the child beside her. Her expression changed several times. Her brows furrowed several times. On account that the other party was his nephew, he forcefully suppressed his anger. "Be good. You should call me Big Aunt, not Big Sister." The spirit seed faltered. He looked anxiously at Lone Moon, who was still being dragged. He immediately changed his words. Then. "Beautiful Big Aunt, can you not hurt my dad?" "No. This kind of scumbag who only cares about doing things but does not care about responsibility." Then. The spirit seed became even more anxious. His little face turned red. He directly squeezed in front of Lone Moon. He opened his little hands and said tearfully, "Then you can bully me. Don't bully Dad, alright?" Shenjing was stunned, and her eyes softened instantly. She seemed to see the shadow of Littling in the past, and her heart moved for no reason. What a good child. She sighed and turned to stare daggers at Lone Moon. You scumbag, you don't even want to take responsibility. Even dying 100 times is not enough. I was wrong, Big Boss Jing. Lone Moon apologized reflexively. I shouldn't be so irresponsible. Wait, responsible? What responsibility? You still have the cheek to ask. Shen Jing pointed at the spiritual seed and said, the child is already so big. Don't you have any shame? Child. It was only then that Lone Moon realized what was going on. He glanced at the spirit seed. His rationality, which had been beaten into submission, suddenly came back to him. He suddenly understood something. Holy shit, you can't be thinking that he was born from me and Shining, right? Why, you don't even want to acknowledge the child anymore. Shen Jing's hand tightened. You actually want your brother to be the one to take over. Humph. Who do you think my little Ing is for you to pick and choose? What do you mean by take over? That's not right. Who said I wouldn't admit? Damn it. He's not my child. No. The more Lone Moon spoke, the more confused he became. Seeing that Shen Jing was already beginning to form a knife, he then said loudly, this child is a spirit seed. We brought him back from the void land. Spirit seed. Shen Jing faltered. She took a closer look at the child. Indeed, she saw some original source chi around him, but it was extremely weak. She then looked up at Shining, her expression even more shocked. The two of you gave birth to a spirit seed. Lone Moon, Qing, Shining, the corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. What kind of godly level of understanding was this? You damn Siscon, don't let your imagination run wild when it comes to Shining. In the end, Shen Jing still did not drag Father Nyo into the chaotic space to beat him up. Lone Moon told her everything about the Void Land, including the matter about Mila asking them to find the spirit seed. You're saying that this child is a spirit seed from Mila Plain? Shen Jing glanced at the child suspiciously. Her eyes narrowed. Yes. Lone Moon nodded hard. Mila used him as an excuse to make us go to the Void Land. That's impossible. Shen Jing frowned. It's true, Boss Jing. She had her eyes on him and had to beat him up no matter what. Shen Jing gave him a disdainful look before continuing. What I mean is, Mila is not a plain assistant at all. He's different from me. He wasn't a manager from the start. That's why he doesn't have a so-called plane that he belongs to. Naturally, he can't produce a spirit seed. What? This time, not only Lone Moon, even Shining and Chef were stunned. Back then, in order to get him to help me train Little Ing, he pretended to be an assistant who lost the manager plane. Shen Jing sighed and continued. Because of his identity as a monitor, no one suspected this. In reality, he doesn't directly manage any plane. But, why did he ask us to find the spirit seed? And he insisted on taking the spirit seed away previously. Shening also suspected him because of this. This child could be a lost spirit seed from another plane. Shen Jing glanced at the child before continuing. Spirit seeds can summon a complete plane's original source. As a monitor, Mila wanted to take him away in order not to cause a conflict between planes. Was a spirit seed so powerful? But why did this setting sound so familiar? Then which plane's spirit seed is he from? Lone Moon asked. How would I know? Shen Jing rolled her eyes at him. It's difficult to find the original plane for something lost to the end of the void. But... She seemed to have thought of something. She glanced at Lone Moon and Shining with a strange expression, causing the hairs on their backs to stand. Her eyes narrowed before she said with a half-smile, the strange thing is, this child actually has an aura that's connected to the two of you. That was why she admitted her mistake just now. Ha! The two of them were stunned at the same time. They exchanged a look and each took 3 steps back. Instantly, they revealed a look of disgust and spoke in unison. Me and him. What a joke. The corner of Loneman's mouth twitched. Isn't spirit seed born from the original source of the plane? It would only be connected to the people of this plane. We only found him, we didn't do anything to him. That's why. I find it strange. Shenjing's expression darkened. If I remember correctly, Little Ing, your plane already has a spirit seed, right? I remember what Kai Tian called her. Oh. Meng Pao. Then where did this spirit seed come from? So the spirit seed and Little Short You were the same kind of existence? Lone Moon was stunned for a moment. Chef's world already had a spirit seed. Could this child be from his plane? But didn't his plane just open not long ago? How could it be so fast? Wait a minute. Their plane was reopened, which meant that it was very likely that there was a spirit seed before. In addition, the plane was reopened by Shining and he was the manager. That was why the spirit seed called them Daddy and Mommy. Holy shit. The 3 of them thought of this at the same time. Their eyes widened. Looks like you know who he is. They knew, but hearing Sister Jing's tone, why did they suddenly have a bad feeling? Anne. Shenjing continued, even a hint of a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Pointing to the plane tree not far away, she said, I wanted to ask just now. Why did you suddenly have another plane tree here, and both of them have no connection to Littling at all? Oh my god, my disguise is going to fall. Sister Jing, listen to my explanation. 3-inch all right. Shenjing's eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled. I'll listen to your explanation. The 3 of you, come with me to chaos to explain. Don't even think of escaping. Lone Moon, Shining, Qing, he wanted to save them, why did 2 of them get involved? Chapter 604. Lone Moon confirmed that the child was indeed the spirit seed of the plane he had just taken over. Hongmeng plane had been destroyed once, and a spirit seed might have indeed been formed then. But because the plane finally collapsed, he accidentally flowed into the end of the void. Originally, when the plane was destroyed, the spirit seed would disappear along with it. But at that time, the God Fiends sealed the original source purple gas in order to save Hongmeng and the others. That was why the spirit seed in the end of the void did not disappear. Later, Shining reopened the plane, and Lone Moon established the Heavenly Dao to become the new manager. Then the spirit seed awakened and took form. He was originally a spirit formed from the original source, that was why he instinctively felt especially close to Lone Moon, who was the manager. And in theory, he was also his superior, there was nothing wrong with calling him Daddy. And Shining was the one who opened the plane, it was equivalent to giving him a new life, it was completely reasonable for him to call her Mommy. But it was precisely such a reasonable incident that accidentally exposed the things that the 3 of them had painstakingly hidden. Their disguises were instantly exposed by Shenjing. The anger that was originally aimed at Father Nyo instantly burned all 3, everyone had a share. An hour later. 3 people with bruised noses and swollen faces crawled out of the chaos, each holding their swollen pig heads, gasping for air. Lone Moon turned and gave Shining a look of disdain and resentment. Didn't you say that you were stronger than Shenjing? Why didn't I see you resist at all? You admitted defeat faster than anyone else. Shining immediately turned and glared back, giving him a similar expression. You speak as if you dare to fight back. Wasn't she used to being a coward? I Ching was the only one who had a strange style. He was clearly the one who looked the worst out of the 3, but his first reaction was to support his master with a pained expression. Master, are you all right? As he spoke, He activated the little bit of spirit power that he had just recovered and conjured a healing seal, treating the bruises on her face as he asked nervously, "Does it hurt?" Shining replied. "It's fine." The pained expression on his face became even more intense. "You're already injured like this, how can it not hurt? Don't move, I'll treat your injuries." As he spoke, he reached out and pulled her into his arms, conjuring a seal with a nervous expression. The corner of Loneman's mouth twitched, and he said directly, "Hee, you should be treated. Hurry up and treat it. If you delay any longer, it might be completely healed." "Shining, Lone Moon, humph. You're still showing off your sister's dog food at this time." Although Shining was the one who suffered the most beatings, she was the one with the least injuries. Due to their physical fitness, Shining was beaten black and blue by Shinjing with every punch. Both of them were beaten half to death by Shinjing's punch. That was why Shining had taken more than 95% of the damage from that beating. It wasn't that she was very loyal, but that Shinjing seemed to be used to beating her up. Once she started, she couldn't seem to stop. Other than teaching him and Chef a few punches in the beginning, she spent the rest of her time beating Shining up. Her fists were so smooth. Lone Moon and Chef were in pain watching from the side, but they couldn't get close to him at all. Occasionally, they would be swept by the wind from his fists and it was enough to make them choke. Just as the few of them were about to say a few words, the Chaos Gate opened once again. Shinjing, who was a step late, had already returned from the Chaos Gate. In her hand, she was dragging an unknown creature whose original appearance could not be seen clearly. Looking at that tattered clothes, they could faintly piece together what looked like a suit. That's right, it was Milu. It was obvious that when she stayed in the Chaos Gate just now, she went to pick up a corpse. Shinjing raised her hand and threw it forward. With a thud, an unknown object rolled one round and stopped at the feet of the three of them. Mili's face, which was so precious just now, was already swollen like a pig. No, he couldn't even be recognized as a pig. He was swollen like a bull. They didn't know what Shinjing did, his other injuries were all recovering, but his face was still too horrible to look at. He laid on the ground motionlessly. Only his eyelids could faintly be seen moving slightly. It was obvious that he was playing dead in a cowardly manner, not daring to wake up. The three of them trembled in unison. They straightened their backs and straightened their bodies. Then, they knelt down in unison. "Sister Jing. We were wrong." Admitting defeat was a good quality of being a manager. The three of them understood this special tradition very well. Humph. Shinjing glanced at the three people in front of her with a smile that was not a smile. Her expression turned cold again. With a wave of her hand, a comfortable sofa appeared in front of them and they sat down. Then, she summoned a coffee table and coffee. She took a sip of the coffee elegantly before her eyes landed on Shining. She was going to settle the score after the beating. "Shen, little, Ing. You've grown up. You even dare to lie to me, is that it?" Shen Ying's entire body trembled. Her head drooped like a quail. "Tell me." She narrowed her eyes. "When did you transfer the plane to these two rascals? Do you think you've grown up and I can't control you anymore?" "No, no, no. Sister." Shining immediately shook her head like a drum. "I can control them, I can control them." Shinjing's gaze turned even colder. Her voice instantly deepened. "Since you're no longer a manager, why don't you go home? How much longer do you intend to stay here?" "Sister." Shining called out in a dragging tone. "Who's your sister?" The coffee in her hand was placed on the coffee table with a thud. The anger that had just been extinguished suddenly flared up again. "I don't have such a sister who doesn't stay at home." If I didn't come this time, how long were you three brats planning to hide it from me? I was wrong. The three of them replied in unison again. If you know you're wrong, then go back. She glared at her. Don't think I can't tell. You can sense the existence of monitors. That proves that your body has changed again. Since you're no longer a manager, there's no need for you to stay here. I can only be at ease if you go back with me. No. Shining raised her head and looked straight at her. What? Was your apology just now just for fun? Her expression turned even colder. It looked like snowflakes were about to float down. But Shining still shook her head. Sister, now is not the time. Why not? Shenjing stopped mid-sentence. She seemed to have thought of something. She glanced at Chef and Lone Moon. You're doing this for these two little brats? Shining sighed. Her voice softened instantly. Sister, I'll be fine. It doesn't matter which plane I'm in. Who says it doesn't matter? You're about to be seduced by those wild brats outside. Big sister. Seeing that she was about to fly into a rage, Chef tightened his grip on Shenying's hand and spoke up in time. You've already agreed to my marriage with Master. Husband and wife should be together, so... Big sister, please don't break us apart. Let Master stay here. Lone Moon instantly understood. He immediately added, Yes, Sister Jing. You're a monitor, you're the fairest. You won't go back on your word, will you? Shen Jing's expression darkened completely. For a moment, the temperature in the entire divine realm seemed to have dropped by tens of degrees. Even Mi Lu, who was playing dead on the ground, shivered from the cold. Dao Feng's gaze swept towards Chef as if he was going to cut him into 1,000 pieces. A while later, she retracted the cold aura around her body and suddenly smiled at them, revealing a smile that was like the blooming flowers in spring. The three of them instantly trembled, and suddenly had the urge to find a place to hide. They felt even more terrified, didn't they? Their legs went soft. They wanted to kneel. Oh, they were already kneeling. For all. Chapter 605. Shenjing narrowed her eyes and looked straight at Chef, before answering, You're right, I did agree. But... She suddenly stood up. I only have this one sister, I can't bear for her to marry far away. If you want to marry her, that's fine, but marry over yourself. With that said, she opened the plane gate. Lone Moon, Shining, not only did she fail to keep her lover, she even lost one. Ha! Wait, Chef, what are you doing? Lone Moon grabbed hold of the restless person. Do you really want to marry yourself over? I Ching looked at Father Nyo, then glanced at Shining at the side, blushing. If it's Master, I can do it. You can do it. Have you freaking forgotten that their goal is to keep Shining? It's not a matter of you marrying or she marrying. Shining obviously doesn't want to go back. You're a useless teammate who's dragging them down. Due to Chef's sudden betrayal, the situation took a turn for the worse. Shenjing was stubborn, seeing that Shining was about to be brought back, and even had to bring along 2 burdens. In the end, there was no other way. Under Father Nyo's crazy hints, Shining could only throw away her moral integrity and return to her old profession, using the great shameless art of acting cute. In order to achieve better results, Lone Moon even helped to use a sorcery, temporarily making Shining return to her 3-year-old appearance. In the next moment, Shenjing directly compromised. Straight face, it's not that you can't not go back with me. After hugging, rubbing the dumpling version of Shining crazily, Shenjing finally regained her rationality, sighed and said, But if anything happens in the future, you'd better tell me honestly. If I find out that you're hiding things from me again, don't expect me to let you off easily. Lone Moon and I Ching, yes, Great King, no problem Great King. Miniature version of Shen Meng, Big Sister is the best. Shen Jing glared at the other two and reached out to poke Shen Ying's forehead out of habit. Just as she was about to poke Shen Ying's forehead, she stopped and hugged Shen Ying instead. She nuzzled Shen Ying's little face again and only let go after a long while. She lowered her head and looked at Shen Ying for a long while before sighing and saying, "Forget it, the two of them are still your assistants. You're afraid that your strength will increase and affect them, so you want to stay here and not leave. I can understand that. You've grown up, I really shouldn't control you anymore. Big sister." Shen Ying paused and looked up at her. "But little Ying." She rubbed her little head and continued, "Don't forget that I'm your biological sister. No matter what happens, this will never change. So don't make me worry, little brat." "Yes." She nodded heavily. Shen Jing's eyes dimmed and she sighed again. She gave instructions on a bunch of broken locks until the plane alarm sounded. Only then did she have no choice but to open the door and drag Milo, who didn't dare to wake up, back. Almost at the instant she disappeared into the plane door, the three of them heaved a sigh of relief. Shen Ying also changed back to her original state and the three of them fell together, lying on the ground like corpses. It was too scary, even scarier than dealing with 10 invaders. Shen Ying wiped the fine sweat on her forehead and raised her hand to open a passage out of habit. There was a faint aura of that plane. "Holy shit! What are you doing?" Lone Moon's heart trembled and he immediately pressed her hand. "Why are you opening the door to that plane again? Didn't Big Sister Jing just leave?" Shen Ying subconsciously replied, "To Insect Planet." She stopped mid-sentence and paused, then said with a face full of regret, "Oh, I got too used to being beaten up by my big sister just now, I forgot that there are no bugs in this plane to relieve stress." Lone Moon, Ching, so after you were beaten up by Shen Jing previously, you turned around and beat up the insect race to vent your anger? What kind of enmity did you have with them? No wonder the insect queen wanted to escape to the end of the void. "Master, what do we do next?" Chef sat up and looked at Shen Ying. Before Shen Ying answered, Lone Moon at the side spoke first. "What else can we do? Let's fix the divine realm first." He pointed to the divine realm beside him which was already in ruins. It was either missing a piece of land here or a piece of sky there. Although when Shen Jing attacked just now, she dragged them into the chaos before beating them up, it was not too far away from here. Even if it was just the remnant power, after a few rounds of continuous beating, the divine realm was also on the verge of collapse. Lone Moon sighed and then stood up. He looked at the two of them and said, "Chef, you fix the divine realm, I'll send the spirit seed back to Hongmeng first." With that said, he directly carried the child who had already fallen asleep on the sofa since they were brought into the chaos to be beaten up. The spirit seed had been away from the plane for too long, it had already just formed a human form. In addition, the original source in its body had also been sucked by demon beasts, it was already very weak. It was already not easy for it to last until now before falling into a deep sleep. They had to send it back to the original source purple gas as soon as possible. He believed that fellow Hongmeng would be very happy to take care of it. "As for Shen Ying, you just stay here obediently." "Oh." Shen Ying nodded and directly lay back down, continuing to laze around with a peace of mind. Lone Moon gave her a look of disdain before carrying the spirit seed and opening the passage to Purple Night Palace to find Hongmeng to hand it over. Chef also began to repair the damaged divine realm like a hardworking little honey. He did not forget to place a few plates of snacks, a pot of tea and a few comfortable pillows where Shen Ying was lying. Although the divine realm was big, it was also a special space that Shen Ying opened up on the basis of the god fiend. Although it was already mostly collapsed, it was not difficult for Chef to repair. So in less than the time of a plate of pastries and half of fruit, the divine realm had already been restored to the appearance of a large green field before. The two plane trees were also still firmly growing in the middle, leaning against each other. Chef glanced at the plane trees, as if thinking of something. He frowned and immediately turned his head away, walking towards Shen Ying's direction. Master. A hint of hesitation flashed across his face, but a hint of red appeared on his face as if he could not suppress it. Do you think Shen Qian? No, big sister has agreed to our marriage. The fruit in Shen Ying's hand paused. She looked up at Chef, who had a serious expression. Half and half. What did she mean, half and half? She thought for a moment before explaining in a low voice. It means that agreeing is one thing. If you really want to get married, you have to let her beat you up again, this time the kind of beating you to death. I Ching. Why did he suddenly feel that he was so weak? He was just about to ask a few more questions when Lone Moon had already returned, but he did not return alone. Beside him was Sister Pear, whom he had never been on good terms with. She looked anxious, and there was another person leaning on her shoulder. That person was covered in blood and was on the verge of death, and they could faintly feel the aura of another plane manager on him. The two of them were stunned. Who is this? Chapter 606. Before Lone Moon could answer, Li Zi, who was supporting the man beside him, her eyes lit up. Shening. With that said, she let go and ran over, grabbing Shening. You're finally back. I've been here a few times already but didn't see you. How have you been recently? Are you hungry? Do you want a pear? With that said, she directly took out a familiar-looking pear and stuffed it over Shening. Fortunately, Chef at the side directly reached out to stop it. Thank you for your kindness, but Master only likes pears that can be eaten. He doesn't like the kind that can only lock people up. Besides, isn't your plane already damaged? Where did you get so much power of the original source to make pears and give to people? Who said that this can't be eaten? Li Zi frowned. I modified it. Shening, do you want to try? Does the people of your position as a manager know that? I Ching frowned, then reminded her. Instead of giving pears, you'd better care about your friend, he's already fallen to the ground. He turned and pointed behind her. Li Zi was stunned for a moment, only then did she realize, she let go just now too suddenly. The injured person who was originally supporting was already lying on the ground, and had even fainted, but his expression was painful, his breathing was even weaker than before. She was instantly shocked. After a while she sighed and said, It's okay, I picked him up anyway. I Ching, Lone Moon, picked up, you're not the one who fell, of course you're okay. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched, then he squatted down and picked up the person again, casually throwing him on the sofa in front of him, casting a few spells consecutively. The person's expression finally looked better, his breathing also slowed down. Humph. Evil brainless fan. Who exactly is this person? I Ching turned to look at Father Nyo. Don't ask me. Father Nyo turned to look at Li Zi. Ask her. The three of them immediately fixed their eyes on Li Zi. I don't know either, I found him at the edge of the void when I was repairing the plane. Li Zi shook her head, after a while thought of something, her eyes darkened. But I sensed the aura of those fellows from the Big Tao organization on him, so I brought him over. Do you think this is a shelter? Shening. She took another step closer and asked with a serious expression. Help me take a look, is he one of those Big Tao organization that slipped through the net? Is there any energy from other planes on him? If there was, then he must be someone like those people who had attacked other planes. No. Shening took a bite of her fruit and shook her head. Oh. She sighed in disappointment. She had thought that she could take revenge on the way, but it turned out that it wasn't the case. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have brought it along. It was quite heavy. Let's wake her up first. Lone Moon interrupted. He glanced at I Ching and said, Chef, help me. I Ching nodded and walked over. This person was a manager after all. Ordinary sorcery might not be able to wake him up. They had to use their manager abilities. It would be safer with Chef around. The two of them simultaneously summoned a white array formation. For a moment, the white light shone brightly, and the dissipating energy on that person's body slowly came to a stop. His originally pale face also slowly recovered some chi and blood. The few of them didn't have to wait for long before that person slowly opened his eyes. He looked around in a daze. His gaze then landed on Shining, who was nibbling on her fruit. His eyes lit up immediately. He turned sideways and rolled down from the sofa. He struggled to pounce over. Milord. He reached out and wanted to hug her. I Ching's expression darkened. Just as he was about to go forward, Pear beside him was one step faster. She directly flipped him away. What are you trying to do? She didn't even hug him. I Ching, who was one step slower. Little bitch. Chef was very unhappy. The man fell back onto the sofa after being flipped by her. But he still hurriedly climbed up and knelt down. Milord. I finally found you. I beg you. Save my plane. If it's you, you can definitely do it. I beg you. With that said, he didn't care about his body that had not recovered yet. He directly kowtowed to her. Lone Moon frowned. Seeing that the primordial chi that he had just recovered was going to be tossed away again. He turned to look at Shining. You know him. Ha! Shining tilted her head, looking confused. All right. I got it. It seemed like she didn't know him. That was strange. Lone Moon then took a step forward and pulled the man up. Stand up and talk. Why are you looking for Shining? Why are you looking for her? What's wrong with your plane? The man looked at Lone Moon, then at Shining beside him. He hesitated for a moment before slowly standing up. He sat down on the sofa. The anxious expression on his face did not fade. Instead, it became even more intense. He then said hurriedly, I don't know if Milord still remembers me. My name is Chao Kun. That day at the Big Tao organization, you once helped me to break free from the plane's lock. The few of them were stunned. Not to mention Shining, who never remembered her name. Even Lone Moon and I Ching didn't remember her. There were hundreds of managers present at that time. Naturally, they couldn't remember all of them. You were one of the 100 managers that day? Lone Moon asked. Yes, yes, yes. He nodded vigorously. Thanks to Milord's help, my plane could break free from the lock of that starry sky. Since you're already free, now you're here. His face turned even paler. As if recalling something, his face was full of grief and indignation. I had no choice but to forcefully cross the plane door to find Milord. Chapter 607. W.H. Why? Chao Kun was confused. Only then did the few of them speak one after another. You can't even deal with invaders, why are you still a manager? We still have a bunch of things to deal with in our own plane, where do we have time to mind other people's business? Time is money, do you understand? It's almost time, I have to cook for Master, who's going to be responsible if she gets hungry. Sigh. Opening a new instance is so troublesome. Chao Kun, this was different from what he imagined, of course, was the person who saved hundreds of planes really these people in front of him? Could they have been possessed by someone? Instead of wasting time here, why don't we hurry back and think about how to deal with invaders? Pear glanced at him and hurriedly chased him away. As a manager, we shouldn't interfere with the affairs of other planes. Don't make things difficult for Xining here. Is it so easy to cling to my idol's thigh? She hasn't even fully hugged it yet. Chao Kun panicked, still unwilling to give up. But Lord clearly helped us to deal with the Big Tao organization last time. Why now? Oh, that was purely an accident, Lone Moon replied casually. At first, he was just curious that there was an official organization among managers, but ever since they went to the administrative committee, they were already completely disappointed in the so-called managers' union. Just take it that we're just going on a tour. Tour. Going to the Big Tao organization was just for a tour. What was the act of directly demolishing it? Leaving behind some souvenirs before leaving. Chao Kun didn't feel good. He looked anxious but didn't know what to say. He glanced at Xining, who was already sprawled lazily on the sofa and chewing on her fruit, not even looking over, and the two people beside her who were watching him like he was a thief. In the end, he had no choice but to fix his pleading gaze on the relatively normal Lone Moon, who was doing some calculations on an abacus. Fellow Daoist, go back if you understand. Just as he was about to speak, Lone Moon raised his head and said with a friendly smile, I've calculated it for you. The total cost of the treatment just now is 35,672 supreme-grade immortal stones. Rounding it up, it'll be 36,000. You know. Chef and I are managers after all, naturally it's more expensive. Ah. He didn't react for a moment. This still had to be calculated? Why do you think it's expensive? Lone Moon narrowed his eyes and shook his head. This is already very favorable. I can ignore the fact that you entered the country illegally, and I don't need you to pay for the visa fees, plane tolls, transportation fees for the injured, and Xinying's consultation fees. Oh, right, we charge by the second. Are you a devil? Which manager would have something like an immortal stone on them? Chao Kun stared at him blankly for a while. Seeing that the other party did not seem to be joking at all, he then realized that he was serious. Fellow Daoist, I really don't have any immortal stones on me right now. How about, no credit? Lone Moon put away the abacus and stood up, looking like he was going to send the guest off. Fellow Daoist. It's not that I want to force you. His expression became even more anxious. But this invader is indeed very special. His power is also very strange. Even until now, I still can't see what kind of person he is. He's even scarier than Yuheng from the Big Tao organization. Although this is only a matter of our plane, no one can guarantee that he won't attack other planes. Lone Moon frowned. The other party's expression became even more worried. As if thinking of something, he hurriedly said, If you don't believe me, follow me to the plane and you'll know. Right now, my entire plane is in chaos, and all living beings are affected. As long as you are willing to help me save the plane, I'll double, no. I can even pay 10 times the immortal stones. Immortal stones, spirit meridians, even the original source chi, as long as you are interested. All right. As long as the plane can be restored. Only then did he realize what the other party had replied. With a confused expression, he said, You agreed. Lone Moon instantly put on his professional business expression and smiled kindly. From what fellow Daoist Chao Kun said, that person is indeed very dangerous. We should indeed go and take a look. You should have said so earlier if you had the money. Of course. Chao Kun's eyes widened. His face was full of disbelief. He was so stubborn just now. Why did he change his mind so quickly? We're all managers. It's only right for us to help each other. Of course we can go and take a look. But we can't guarantee that we can really help. All right. I know. He nodded vigorously, his face wild with joy. Lone Moon smiled even more kindly. He even took a step forward and patted the other party's shoulder. Come. Tell us in detail about the situation of your plane. This way, it'll be easier for us to operate. Especially the valuable parts. All right, fellow Daoist. Thank you, fellow Daoist. I Ching, Shining, pair. A while later, the corner of I Ching's mouth twitched. Master, Father Nyo is, Shining nodded. I guess he's planning to expand his business to other planes. Then we're really going over. Before he finished speaking, Lone Moon, who had almost stripped Xiao Kun clean, turned back and waved at them. Shining, chef. Get ready to go. Shining turned back to look at Chef before answering, that's right. We're really going. The few of them were ready to set off after a meal. After asking, they found out that the plane door on Xiao Kun's side was already locked. There was no way to directly enter that plane. I left a back door at the border of the plane. Xiao Kun hurriedly explained. It connects to the land of nothingness. We can pass through there. Nothingness. Pear faltered for a moment. She turned to look at Xiao Kun. That's why you suddenly fell at the border of my plane. Her plane had once been swallowed by the nothingness until there was only one city left. Although the nothingness had disappeared now, there was still some remnant aura at the border. Yes. Xiao Kun nodded and continued. It's also a coincidence that the exit is just there. So to enter our plane, we'll have to trouble fellow Daoist Fong Fong to let us go. All right. Pear's eyes lit up. She said excitedly, Shining, are you going to our plane? Why don't you stay for a few more days? As she spoke, she reached out to pull her, but was stopped by Chef again. Fellow Daoist, you're thinking too much. We're just passing by. Go away, little bitch. Pear immediately glared back. So what if you're a disciple? Let go of my idol. Seeing that the two of them were about to fight, Shining was still chewing on her fruit nonchalantly. Instead, Lone Moon directly interjected. All right, let's get going. Only then did he stop the two brainless fans. Pear opened the plane door somewhat reluctantly and sent the few of them to the border of the nothingness. Perhaps knowing that her abilities were limited, she did not force herself to follow them over. Chef was instantly in a good mood. Chapter 608. Xiao Kun took out a round compass and tossed it forward. Immediately, the compass flew up and a red light flashed in the center. As if guiding the way, it drew a long line of light and pointed straight in a direction to the left. The door is over there. Xiao Kun pointed in that direction and led the few of them in that direction. The few of them exchanged a look before following and stepping into the void. They did not walk far. After about a quarter of an hour or so, the space in front of them suddenly began to distort. A moment later, they saw a passageway that looked like a plane door open in the void, but it was pitch black inside. We're here. Xiao Kun was delighted and walked a few steps forward. Just as he was about to enter, his expression changed as he thought of something. He looked back at the few of them and said, My lord, this passageway is not stable, so I don't know which plane we will return to. You must be careful. Lone Moon nodded and set up layers of arrays around the few of them. Xiao Kun took a deep breath and walked in. In the next instant, they felt a chill beside them. It was obvious that they had already arrived in another world. But it was still pitch black all around them. In the distance, they could faintly hear a strange rustling sound, as if something was approaching. Not good. Xiao Kun's expression changed instantly. Panic flashed across his eyes as he hurriedly said, We've reached a small world that has already fallen. We can't stay here. With that said, he hurriedly conjured a seal to open up a space teleportation. Before he could cast a spell, his body suddenly swayed and he opened his mouth to spit out blood. His expression became even uglier. The primordial chi that he had just recovered in the divine realm dissipated as if it had been punctured. Even his aura became weaker. Loneman's eyes and hands were sharp. He took the opportunity to pull him up so that he did not fall to the ground. He released his divine perception and immediately sensed that there was a dense group of unknown creatures not far away, rushing towards them at high speed. Direction? He asked in a low voice. That way. Chao Kun understood what he meant. Suppressing the pain in his body, he pointed to the right and answered anxiously, the place behind the two realm gates in the north is safe. Lone Moon directly conjured a seal and instantly opened up a space teleportation passageway. Let's go. With that said, he carried Chao Kun and walked over. Chef followed immediately. Just as he was about to enter, he realized that the person beside him was not moving. He immediately turned back and called out, "Master." Shening did not answer. Instead, she stood rooted to the ground and turned her head to look into the depths of the darkness. She seemed to be deep in thought. "Ha! What are you waiting for?" Seeing that the two of them were not catching up, Lone Moon suddenly retreated from the passageway. "Hurry up and catch up." "Oh." Shening turned around and followed Chef into the passageway. The portal disappeared in an instant, and the few of them felt the scenery in front of them change. In an instant, they arrived at another place. Suddenly, a large expanse of white light appeared in front of them. Their surroundings were finally lit up, and they subconsciously squinted their eyes. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that they were in front of a tall palace. Immortal energy lingered around it, and fresh flowers covered the ground. This place seemed to be the peak of a divine mountain, and one could faintly see blue divine power in the air. However, the surroundings were extremely quiet. There was no sound at all. "Everyone, don't worry, this place is very safe." Before Chao Kun could finish his words, his figure suddenly swayed and he directly fell down. "Hey! Chao Kun!" Lone Moon squatted down and pushed the person on the ground, but there was no reaction at all. His breathing also became weaker and weaker. "It's probably because the situation in the plane has worsened," Chef said. "The manager's power originally came from the plane. If there was a problem with his plane, he naturally became weaker." Lone Moon frowned. Seeing that he could not wake the person on the ground, he simply set up a large-scale spell to temporarily lock the energy in his body that was about to collapse. Only then did he stop. "Looks like he won't wake up for a while." He directly picked up the person on the ground and glanced at the palace in front of them. "Let's go in first." With that said, he directly walked in. Perhaps because Chao Kun was unconscious, the array in front of the palace seemed to have lost its effect. There was no reaction at all. They entered the palace unimpeded. After passing through the palace door, there was a very large courtyard inside. There was nothing but a plain tree erected in the middle. This should be the panoramic view of Chao Kun's plane. Lone Moon placed Chao Kun under the tree and then carefully sized up this plane. The appearance of this tree was even worse than what Chao Kun had imagined from the water mirror. The entire tree was already 2/3 black. Only a few patches of green occasionally appeared. Especially the green leaves on the tree, almost all of them were already dyed black. Only a few scattered spots of not very pure green were mixed in. It looked like the problem of this plane was more serious than imagined. Lone Moon had to consider the problem of recouping his losses. "What do we do now?" I Ching glanced at the person who was still unconscious beside the tree. "Chao Kun has not woken up. We do not know the specific situation of the plane. What else can we do? Lone Moon frowned. We can only investigate ourselves. Glancing at the plane tree that was almost completely dyed black, he suddenly had a premonition that this business was going to be a loss. The place we came from just now should be these black areas. To find out what happened, we can only enter those areas that are still considered normal to take a look. He examined the entire plane tree back and forth before pointing at the top of the tree. A small world that was already half dyed black. Let's go to this small world to take a look first. I Ching and Shining exchanged a look. They had no objections. Lone Moon thought about it and turned around to set up a few array formations around Chao Kuan. Only then did he try to open the passage to that small world. Perhaps because it was not his own plane, he only managed to open it after several attempts. Chef turned back to look at the person on the ground. Something flashed across his eyes. He opened his mouth but did not make a sound. Only then did he pull Shining and follow Father Nyo's footsteps. The three of them instantly disappeared from the palace. The next moment, they appeared in a desolate area. The sky was gloomy. There was nothing. Chef then spoke. Father Nyo, you suspect Chao Kuan. He did not use a question but an affirmative sentence. Lone Moon glanced at him before nodding. It's mainly because the timing of his appearance was too coincidental. It's better to be on guard. This plane was locked. They could only come out to seek help through the void. He also said that the location of the exit to the void was not fixed. There were so many places with the void. How did he just happen to appear near Pear's plane? Coincidentally, Pear even knew them. Coincidentally, they even defeated people from the Big Tao organization. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? Chef also felt that it was too much of a coincidence. Then why did you agree to let him come here? Didn't he say that there was a powerful invader here? An invader who could deal with a manager had to be at least a manager level or above. Lone Moon turned back to look at Shining. Don't we have one too? Who knows, they might be able to find out what Shinying's identity was. Ha! A certain person who was chewing on a fruit looked up. It was obvious that she was not listening at all. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Whose business was it exactly? Could the person involved be more attentive? It's none of your business. Eat your fruit. Oh. She continued to eat obediently. Lone Moon sucked in a deep breath and sighed. Forget it. He was already used to being angry. Let's see what exactly happened here. Before he finished speaking, a joyful voice suddenly came from the side. Look, there are a few living ones here. Chapter 609. Turning back, they saw a figure flying towards them from the darkness. It was a very tall woman dressed in green. When she got closer, they could see that she did not look like a human. Although she had the shape of a human, her skin was dark blue, almost black. She blended in with the darkness behind her. Demon. But there was no demon aura on her. The three of them were shocked. They could not tell who she was. That person flew over and glanced at them. Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock. She was stunned for 2 seconds. For some reason, she suddenly felt a little helpless. She turned and shouted, "Senior! Senior! Senior sister, come quickly! Come quickly! I found 2 of them alive. What are you making a fuss about?" A reprimanding voice came from behind her, and then another 3 or 4 figures flew over, replying as they flew. How many people have you found? Is there a need to be so? Ha! The person's voice paused, and he glanced over, as if he was also shocked, and looked straight over. Senior sister, this The person who appeared first turned to look at the woman in the middle who seemed to be the leader. That person then came back to her senses. She hurriedly said, "What are you still waiting for? Hurry and bring them here." The few people behind her finally reacted. They took a few quick steps forward. As they walked, they cast spells. Instantly, a spell that they had never seen before appeared under their feet. I Ching frowned. Just as he was about to conjure a spell, Lone Moon pulled him and sent him a voice transmission. "Wait. These people are a little strange. Let's wait and see first." Chef then put his hand down. The array under their feet flashed. The two of them felt their bodies lighten. They flew directly to the other side. So it was just a flying spell. I Ching immediately relaxed. He habitually turned to look at Shining behind him. "Master." As expected, there was no array under her feet. She was still in the same place. There's another one. The group of blue-skinned people seemed to have just discovered Shining. Once again, they cast a spell and pulled Shining over. The place they were at happened to be in the area where the black and white met. With this spell, the three of them were completely pulled into the area that was swallowed by the darkness. "Senior sister, what do we do now?" one of the disciples asked. The woman in the middle looked around, then looked back at the three people and said, "Bring them back to the camp first." With that said, he picked up Shining, who was at the side, and flew into the darkness with her on his sword. When the others saw this, they also summoned their spiritual swords. As if they did not see that they had cultivation, two of them walked directly towards Lone Moon and I Ching, cupped their fists and said politely, "Young master, please excuse us." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and pulled them up onto the spirit sword. Lone Moon glanced at the hands that were wrapped around his body, as if afraid that he would drop them. For some reason, he suddenly had a strange feeling in his heart. He felt that something was wrong. The further they flew, the darker their surroundings became. However, this didn't have much of an effect on high-grade cultivators. These strange-looking people seemed to have night vision as well. There was nothing obstructing them. The group did not fly for long. In less than a quarter of an hour, they stopped on an empty ground. Lone Moon took a look and saw dozens of people standing on the ground. Upon closer inspection, they were all old, weak women and children. Their expressions were not very good, and there was even a hint of dejection in them. These female cultivators landed directly and brought the few of them into the crowd. The group of people looked up and their eyes lit up. They were not afraid at all. Instead, they surrounded them excitedly. "Immortal masters are back." They looked with joy at the few people who brought them here and said anxiously, "Immortal masters, when can we leave?" "Yes, immortal masters. It's too dangerous here. Hurry and bring us away. If we wait any longer, Fallen Night might come back again." "Yes, yes. Time is pressing." These people all looked flustered, as if they were very afraid of something. The leading woman who brought Shining back just now stepped forward and said, "Everyone, don't worry. Our Dawning Pills sect is here to save everyone. Once the people from the sect arrive, they will bring everyone to a safe place. Moreover, Fallen Night never looks back. It has already passed, and nothing will happen again." The woman swept a glance at the crowd and continued, "This time, the area involved is very wide. We need to search the vicinity a few more times to prevent missing anything. Everyone, please calm down." Only then did everyone's expressions soften and they quietened down. Those strange-looking female cultivators then dispersed. Some continued to search for something, while others set up defensive arrays around them. Lone Moon frowned and discussed with I Ching via voice transmission. He then guessed the current situation. It was obvious that the people who brought them here did not have bad intentions. To be precise, they had good intentions. Some disaster might have just happened here. These female cultivators were cultivators from the sect who came to rescue them. That was why they brought them here as refugees. But why did they look so strange? Lone Moon did not know the reason. On the way here, he had checked that these cultivators were not human cultivators, but they were not demons either. They seemed to be a type of cultivation that he had never seen before. But looking at the reactions of these mortals, they did not seem to think that there was anything wrong with people with blue skin. In any case, they trusted them very much. Just as he was thinking, a female cultivator suddenly walked over with a chair in each hand. She smiled at him kindly and placed it in front of them. Both young masters must have been frightened just now. Do you want to sit for a while? With that said, she turned to look at Yi Qing beside her. It was obvious that the chair was for the two of them. Lone Moon was stunned. He looked down at the chair and was instantly confused. Why was she so polite only to him and Chef? He subconsciously turned to look at the big group of old and weak women and children standing in front of him. But he realized that everyone just looked at them curiously and then turned back with a look of certainty. It was as if there was nothing wrong with these cultivators giving them chairs. He was stunned. He could only reply politely, "Thank you, Mississippi, no. You're welcome." The woman blushed and laughed a little foolishly. "Young master, please sit down. We don't know when the spirit boat will arrive. You guys rest for a while." With that said, she smiled again and turned to leave. Lone Moon used his divine perception to scan the chair. Finding nothing unusual, he then sat down. Chef at the side, however, took a step to the side out of habit. He turned to look behind him and said, "Master, sit." With that said, he even took out a plate of pastries and handed it over. Oh. Shining subconsciously took it. She grabbed a piece of cake and stuffed it into her mouth as she turned to sit down. In the next moment, the crowd that was bustling just now suddenly fell silent. More than 10 pairs of disapproving eyes immediately turned and fixed on Shining. As if she had done something that angered both humans and gods, the originally kind crowd was instantly filled with dissatisfaction and contempt. Even the few cultivators just now were the same. "Ha! Shining, can't I eat cakes?" Shining was stunned. Suddenly, the spirit chi in the sky fluctuated. Someone exclaimed. "It's here. The spirit boat is here." Chapter 610. Everyone looked up and saw a white spirit boat flying over from afar. The spirit boat was huge and had 3 levels. They could faintly feel the chaotic aura above it. It seemed that there were already many people on it. Perhaps because the flat ground below was too small, the spirit boat did not descend. Instead, it floated above everyone. In a short while, 2 people dressed in the same clothes as the female cultivator flew down from above. They talked for a while with the leading lady here, then said loudly to everyone, "Everyone, this is the welcoming spirit boat of our Dawning Pill sect. It will bring you to a safe place." Everyone's faces lit up. The lady conjured a simple transportation array with both hands and continued, "Please use this transportation array to board the boat." With that said, she looked around and turned towards Shining and the others. She cupped her fists and said to them, "Young masters, please board the boat first." Lone Moon and Yi Qing were stunned. Why were they boarding first? But seeing that no one around them moved, it was not good for them to ask more. They nodded and thanked her, then walked towards the transportation array and pulled Shining along. There was nothing wrong with the array. Once they entered, they felt a white light flash before their eyes and were instantly transported to the spirit boat. Indeed, the spirit boat was already densely packed with people. Like the people below, they seemed to have just escaped. Most of them looked like they had just survived a disaster. There were many female cultivators on the spirit boat who were also dressed in green. Seeing the few of them coming up, everyone turned to look at them curiously. Lone Moon did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the scene seemed to have quietened down. Even the two people beside the array were stunned. How could it be? The lady on the right stiffened. She looked at him and Chef and seemed to react after a while. She turned to the disciple beside her and asked, "Are there any empty rooms on the top floor?" The disciple was stunned. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, "Yes, yes, yes." So it was prepared for Uncle Master Zhang. But she went to investigate Sunset Night. That's why she did not come with us. Then let these two young masters stay there first. With that said, she turned to look at Lone Moon and Chef. Her gaze seemed to soften as she said, "Young masters, it will take us 3 days to reach the nearest town. We will have to stay on the spirit boat for a while. The boat is simple and crude. Please follow me first." With that said, she turned and walked towards the stairs. "Thank you." The strange feeling in Lone Moon's heart deepened, but he still followed. Chef and Shining naturally followed behind. Unfortunately, before she could take 2 steps, a female cultivator beside her was shocked. She quickly pulled Shining back and glared at her angrily. "Why are you following them?" "Ha!" Shining paused and took another step back. Wasn't she supposed to follow? "Go, go, go." The female cultivator grew even angrier, and pointed to the lower floor in a very rude manner. "You can't go up, you can only stay below." "Why?" "Master." I Ching's eyes turned cold. He reached out and pulled Shining back. His eyes turned to the woman. The woman felt a chill in her heart. She was stunned. She could faintly feel a terrifying aura coming towards her. "Chef!" Lone Moon hurriedly called out, stopping the person who was about to lose his temper. The woman who was leading the way was also stunned. She glanced at Shining and said with some surprise, "She's your master? Then are you, cultivators?" Lone Moon then turned and cupped his fists. "Immortal Elder, the 3 of us are indeed cultivators." With that said, he released some Foundation establishment spiritual pressure. The woman's eyes widened. She was even more shocked. She hurriedly returned the greeting. "I don't dare to call you Immortal Elder. So it's 3 fellow Taoists. I've dug my eyes out. Fellow Taoist, you're too polite." Lone Moon continued. "It's just that this friend of mine doesn't know the way. It's really not convenient for her to separate from us. You see, if they let Shining leave their sight, she would definitely get lost." The woman was stunned. "Doesn't know the way? Can she get lost on the spirit boat?" But looking at the 2 men, she seemed to have thought of something. In the end, she still compromised. "Since we're all cultivators, then we'll arrange for her to stay next to you." "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Lone Moon smiled politely and thanked her again. The woman's face instantly turned red. She hurriedly waved her hand and smiled. "You're welcome. It's what we should do, what we should do." With that said, she directly led the few of them upstairs. When they went up to the top floor, they realized that although this spirit boat looked huge, it wasn't very luxurious inside. It seemed to be specially used to transport people. Apart from Lone Moon and Chef's room on the top floor, which was relatively well prepared, the rest were really just rooms. There wasn't even a chair. Especially Shining. She was directly shoved to the next room. When she went in, she realized that there were already more than 10 female cultivators in long robes sitting inside. Some were resting with their eyes closed. Some were regulating their breathing. More or less, they all had some injuries on their bodies. When they saw her come in, they all looked up. Several gazes swept over her. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she kept feeling that those people were looking at her in a strange way. The female cultivator who led her in explained and went out. Only then did the people inside retract their gazes and go about their own business. They didn't pay much attention to her. Shining didn't think much about it. After confirming that there really weren't any chairs inside, she took out a thick cushion and found a corner to sit down. She calmly nibbled on her own fruit. So boring. When can we start eating? She didn't sit for long. After about 2 fruits, a familiar fragrance wafted over. In the next moment, the door opened with a creak. Chef walked in on time with a table full of dishes. He looked straight ahead and stopped in front of Shining. He put down the small table and handed over a pair of chopsticks. "Master, it's time to eat." "Oh." Shining sped up to finish the fruit in her hand. Then, she took the chopsticks. In front of the room full of people, she began to eat alone. The female cultivators hadn't recovered from the shock of the man who suddenly came in. In the next moment, they smelled the fragrance of delicious food in the room. Even though the people here had already abstained from eating for a long time, they couldn't help but feel their stomachs rumbling. So the whole room was instantly filled with the sound of swallowing. So fragrant, didn't senior sister just say that this woman was also a cultivator? Why did she still want to eat? And eat with such relish? Yet the two of them didn't have the slightest self-awareness of seduction. One ate noisily while the other held a glass of water and handed a handkerchief from time to time. She would even make a few introductions. "Master, Father Nyo isn't here. Eat slowly. There's no rush. Master, try this stewed meat. I've been simmering it with spirit chi. The time is just right. It melts in the mouth. Master, this spirit soup is rich and fragrant. I still have some left. Do you want another bowl?" "Master," with every sentence he said, everyone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The fragrance around them felt even more fragrant. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore and stood up. As she walked out, she said, "I'm going out to change shifts with junior sister. I feel much better too." "I'm going too." "Me too. I'm going out to get some fresh air." "Wait for me." In an instant, more than half of the people in the room left. Yet the two of them didn't have any self-awareness. They continued to eat calmly as if no one else was around. Chapter 6:11. 2 hours later, when all the dishes on the table had been swept clean, Shining rubbed her stomach to show that she was full. I-Ching carried the small table back to the room next door, and the female cultivators came back one after another. But it was different from the way they turned a blind eye to her. For a moment, everyone looked at her with an inexplicable envy, jealousy, and hatred. Ha! Shining was stunned, and before she could think about it, a girl with a Dharma talisman on her arm suddenly came over, and very naturally put her arm around her shoulder and said, "Hey sister. I am Lu Lin, how should I address you?" "Shining." "So it's little sister Shin." She cupped her fists and looked at her. "Oh yes, that person just now, is he your disciple?" As she spoke, she even winked at her ambiguously. I guess so." Shining nodded. Her eyes suddenly lit up, and she said with some excitement, "I see that his cultivation is not bad. He is already at the perfected foundation establishment, right?" "No. To be precise, more than that." "Don't hide it, I am also a foundation establishment cultivator, how can I not see it?" The other party gave her a look that said if she continued to pretend, she would not be able to. With that said, she nervously rubbed her hands and said, "That. I see that your disciple looks like an immortal. I wonder what his name is. Does he have a Tao companion?" Shining was stunned for a moment, and turned to look at her from head to toe. "You want to woo him?" "Ah. Woo." Lu Lin was stunned, as if she did not expect her to be so direct. Instantly, her face turned red, and she said nervously, Fellow Daoist, don't talk nonsense. I just admire him a little. I definitely would not dare to be rude to young master. I just wanted to ask if he has a Tao companion." "Yes." Shining nodded directly. "What?" Lu Lin's face fell instantly, and even the girl who was eavesdropping at the side showed some disappointment in her eyes. She even asked subconsciously, "Who is it?" "Me." Lu Lin, everyone. Shining faintly felt that the enthusiasm that everyone had for her just now was extinguished with a whoosh. The way they looked at her became even more strange, with some indignation as if a good cabbage had been taken by a pig. Shining. What's with this uncomfortable feeling? Perhaps it was because Lu Lin saw that she didn't look too good, but she clenched her teeth and patted her shoulder. "I didn't expect that a disciple could become a Tao companion. Sister, although you look like a man, I didn't expect you to be so good at it." Shining stiffened. What the hell did he mean by manly? She had even changed into a new pink dress this morning. What man, huh? She subconsciously swept her gaze across the room and saw that all the girls were dressed in green. Her eyes widened as she instantly understood something. Oh, so that's how it is. Shining. Just as she was about to say something, Father Nyo's voice suddenly transmitted over. The door was pushed open in an instant. Indeed, Lone Moon was leaning against the door frame, his expression serious. In an instant, the room fell silent. Everyone's eyes turned to the door, and they could faintly hear a few gasps. Lone Moon, however, didn't feel much. He scanned the room and fixed his gaze on Shining on the right. He said directly, "Come here for a while, there's something urgent." With that said, he turned and went next door. "Oh." Shining responded. She was about to follow him out when her hand tightened. Lu Lin, who had just started a conversation, grabbed her hand tightly. She widened her eyes and said, "Sister, he isn't also your Tao companion, is he?" "Oh, that's not it." Shining shook her head. Lu Lin heaved a sigh of relief. After a while, she added, "He's my father." "Ah. Ah." Lu Lin was stunned. So old. She couldn't tell. Seeing that she was about to go out, she immediately reacted and pulled her back. "Then do you mind having a stepmother? Do you want to lose all your fortune?" "Oh, for all, oh, Shining." A hurried voice came from outside the door. Shining then walked out quickly and turned to the left. Wrong direction, this way. So she turned back to the right, inside the house. Lone Moon casually set up a few isolation arrays. "I just went out to find out about the situation in this small world." Lone Moon recalled the reactions of those people when he went down to find out about the situation. He subconsciously frowned and said, "There is indeed a huge disaster nearby. Now the people on this spirit boat have all been rescued by the nearby sections. They are going to seek refuge. There are about thousands of people on the spirit boat. And it's not just this boat. I heard that all the sects have been mobilized. There are thousands of other spirit boats like this one everywhere." I Ching counted the number of people in his heart and immediately frowned. What kind of disaster is it? That was why it could cause such serious consequences. Even the combined forces of all the sects could only move all the people away. They call it Fallen Night. Lone Moon's expression darkened. He continued, I have never heard of this name before. But I heard from the people on this boat that fallen night is a kind of natural disaster. It is invisible and formless. No one knows how it is formed, much less when it will happen. But everywhere it goes, people die. Only a few survive. I Ching's expression darkened. He asked directly, invisible things. That's right. Lone Moon nodded. They said that the location of fallen night is not fixed every time. But once it happens, everything within a radius of 10,000 miles will be affected. The living beings chosen by fallen night will turn into ashes directly. Not even their bones will be left. Even the earth will become a barren wasteland. Barren wasteland? I Ching was stunned. As if thinking of something, he directly said, could it be that the fallen night they speak of is related to the expanding darkness of this small world? I think so too. Lone Moon nodded. The place where we landed in this small world is the border of the black and white boundary. The fallen night they speak of may be this darkness. He turned to look at the still dark surroundings. But the strange thing is, apart from us, it seems that no one else can see the darkness around us. Have they been eroded by the invaders? Chef suddenly remembered that the invading manager had used a similar method to control Father Nyo. No. Lone Moon shook his head. I used my divine perception to check their meridians, primordial spirits and even souls. I did not see any problems. Then that was strange. What exactly was this darkness around them? And it was not just these people. Even they did not feel anything wrong after coming in for so long. It was strange no matter how they thought about it. Shening. The two turned to look at the person who was chewing on a fruit. What about you? Did you discover anything? What exactly is this darkness? Shening was stunned. Then she tilted her head and said, nothing. The two's expressions became more serious. Even Shening did not sense it. But she suddenly added, this darkness might not be something from the outside. Lone Moon, I Ching, what? Chapter 6:12. If it wasn't from outside, could it be a local product? What do you mean? Shening took a bite of the fruit and turned to look at them. Haven't you checked the spirit chi in this world? Spirit chi. Lone Moon hesitated and subconsciously released his divine perception. What does this have to do with spirit chi? Wait. He stopped mid-sentence because not only did he feel the spirit chi, but he also found that the spirit chi around them was not weak. It was not inferior to the spirit chi in their plane. But they were clearly in this darkness. Spirit chi was the purest and could not mix with other auras, not to mention yin chi, demon chi and other yin chi. They would repel each other. Even when they were in the void, there were all kinds of energy mixed together. Spirit chi and other energy repelled each other, so it was not thick. But it was different here. Although they were in this darkness, the surrounding spirit chi was very gentle and stable. There was no sense of rejection. It was as if even the spirit chi was not affected by this darkness. It was as if it was born a part of it. How can this be? What exactly was this darkness? Why don't we look more closely? Shening added. The two exchanged a look and their expressions became serious. They both closed their eyes and released their divine perception. Lone Moon directly observed the surrounding spirit chi. I Ching, on the other hand, probed into the meridians of the cultivators outside. He saw that whether it was the surrounding or the spirit chi that was absorbed into the bodies of the cultivators, it was not the five-element spirit chi that they were familiar with. Instead, it was wisps of a special black aura. Lone Moon's eyes shot open. Holy shit! What is that? I Ching reached out and activated a bit of the spirit chi in his body to test it. Immediately, a white light appeared in his hand. It was completely different from the surrounding darkness. But in less than a moment, it was swallowed by the surrounding darkness. The black light disappeared, but the aura was exactly the same. Could it be that this is not spirit chi? Lone Moon was shocked. It is spirit chi. Shining suddenly retorted. She pointed at the neighboring area with her fruit. Aren't they all cultivating normally? But this color, every plane has its own differences, after all. Then this difference was too big, wasn't it? Wait. After talking for so long, she still did not say what exactly this darkness was. Master. I Ching seemed to have thought of something. In a low voice, he said, if the spirit chi in this plane was originally like this, then why was the spirit chi we saw different when we were outside the darkness? When they first arrived at the place where the black and white intersected, the spirit chi there was clearly normal. That's right. Lone Moon also thought of this problem. Why was the white part normal? Maybe it hasn't spread there yet. Shining said. I Ching paused, then his eyes widened. Master, do you mean to say that this darkness might have existed in this plane from the beginning, but someone let it out, and that's why it's like this? Yes. She nodded. How is that possible? Lone Moon still did not understand. How can you be sure that this darkness was not brought by an invader? If this darkness was not the work of an invader, how could it have spread to the entire plane? The plane tree that they saw earlier was about to turn completely black. Because everyone is alive. Shining pointed at the door. A lot. Lone Moon was stunned. Then he reacted. That's right. If that so-called fallen knight was really the work of an invader, then based on his power that was strong enough to deal with managers, how could these mortals of a mere small plane survive? And there were quite a lot of them. More importantly, the order of the entire small world did not show any signs of chaos. Malicious invaders entered other planes with only two motives. One was like those fellows from the Big Tao organization, who wanted to directly absorb the power of the plane to strengthen themselves. The other was like the invader that Shen Jing dealt with previously, who wanted territory. They did not have the slightest bit of pity for the living beings of the original plane. They even had to be eliminated. Unless this invader was especially stupid. Not only did he snatch other people's territory, he even planned to raise other people's sons. But as long as living beings did not perish, the plane would not die. Even if he killed the manager, one day the world's consciousness would choose a new manager. By then, wouldn't the invader have snatched it for nothing? So no matter how one looked at it, this darkness did not look like something that invaded. Shining was right. This could have originally belonged to this world. But for some reason, it was released by the invader first. Lone Moon could not figure out the other party's intention no matter how he thought about it. Looks like we have to find the source of this darkness first before we can find that invader. In the next few days, the three of them stayed on the spirit boat peacefully. There were more and more people on the boat. Shining was used to staying in the house and did not feel bored. But the few female cultivators in the room who initially did not pay much attention to her suddenly became warm to her. Not only did they come over to talk to her from time to time, but they also often asked her about Lone Moon. They smiled at her amiably, and all of them wore the expression of a competent stepmother. As a filial daughter, looking at this group of people who had ill intentions towards her father, Shining naturally, without question, without reservation, without hesitation, sold Father Nyo. Oh, you're asking about what my Father Nyo likes. 3 days later. The spirit boat finally landed in an immortal city. Everyone disembarked and entered the city. The cultivators from the sects also prepared to return. Shining and the others came out late. By the time they disembarked, there were not many people around. Just as they were about to enter the city to find out about the situation, a female cultivator suddenly rushed over. She looked a little familiar. She seemed to be one of the people who lived with Shining these few days. Her name seemed to be Lu Lin. "Young Master Lone Moon, please wait." Perhaps because she was in a hurry, her face was flushed. "Is there anything else, fellow Daoist?" Lone Moon replied. Lu Lin's face reddened even more. After a while, she said that. "I wonder what plans young master has for the future. Are you going back to the sect? I wonder which sect the three of you are from. If it's on the way, why not follow us? We can take care of each other on the way. There's no need." Lone Moon smiled politely. "We are itinerant cultivators and do not belong to any sect. We will not disturb you fellow Taoists." "I see." She instantly looked disappointed. She stared straight at Lone Moon's face, as if in a daze. Lone Moon felt goosebumps all over his body. He frowned and said, "We have something else to do. We will take our leave now." Lu Lin seemed to wake up. "Wait." She hurriedly stuffed the storage bag in her hand over. "Please take this, young master. My name is Lu Lin. I am a disciple of Dawning Pill's sect. If you need anything in the future, feel free to come to Dawning Pill's sect to look for me." With that said, she gave him a deep look. As if afraid that he would reject her, she did not wait for his reply and turned to walk away. What the hell? Lone Moon was stunned. He had cheated many people. This was the first time he saw someone rush to give him money before he even did anything. He subconsciously opened the bag and looked inside. The corner of his mouth twitched. There were not spirit stones or Dharma artifacts inside. Instead, there was a pile of food ingredients, spirit fruits, and snacks. Why did she give him this? Straight-faced Lone Moon reflexively turned to look at Shining beside him. "What did you say to her?" "I didn't." Shining looked innocent. "Didn't you say why she gave me a bag of food?" Shining thought about it and added seriously, "Maybe it's because you, Father Nyo, are more handsome." This made sense. He accepted it. But something felt wrong. Chapter 613. This was originally a small city, but because various sects kept sending people here, the streets of the city were already filled with people. But it was very orderly inside, perhaps because there were cultivators here, there was no chaos. Shining and the others entered and realized that there were not only disciples from Dawning Pill's sect, but also disciples from other sections. Even in the west of the city, there were already houses made of sorcery, and many mortals were queuing up to move in. Lone Moon could not help but feel a bit of the modern atmosphere of fighting floods and disaster relief. He did not expect the sects in this small world to have such a harmonious relationship with mortals. Lone Moon decided to go to the Scattered Cultivators Hall first. They called themselves itinerant cultivators because itinerant cultivators were more convenient, and also because itinerant cultivators had always been the most well-informed. And the Scattered Cultivators Hall was an itinerant cultivator organization. He had already found out about it during the few days on the spirit boat. It was a place specially for itinerant cultivators without sects to receive and issue all kinds of missions. From finding rare herbs to hunting spirit beasts, there were all kinds of missions. So itinerant cultivators gathered there to gather information. As they had asked for the location beforehand, they did not spend much time to find the place. The entrance was filled with cultivators. The moment the three entered, a woman who looked like a manager turned around. "Fellow Daoist, inside." The man stopped mid-sentence and stared blankly at the two people who had just entered the room. He was so shocked that he didn't recover for a long time. Fellow Daoist. Fellow Daoist. Lone Moon called out a few times. Ah. Ah. The manager was stunned, then reacted and hurriedly welcomed them in. Fellow Daoists, please come in. I wonder if you are here to issue a mission or to accept a mission. We just started cultivating not long ago. We want to come here to issue a mission, Lone Moon answered. Fellow Daoist is an itinerant cultivator. The person was even more shocked. All three of us are. Lone Moon nodded. 3. The steward paused and scanned the few of them. Only then did he notice Shining, who was at the back. He seemed to have thought of something and nodded in understanding. I see. Then I guess fellow Daoist will have to wait for a while. The steward pointed at the densely packed crowd inside and said, Today is the day of the new mission in the hall, so it's rather busy. After saying that, he thought for a moment and led them to a table at the side to sit down. The few of them followed him and sat down. Perhaps it was because they were unfamiliar faces, but the bustling room suddenly became much quieter. Most of the cultivators turned to look at them. There were many people in the hall, but the strange thing was that most of them were female cultivators. Only a few of them were men with concealment array formations around them. Lone Moon did not mind. Instead, the steward who had just welcomed them seemed to be very curious. As he poured tea, he said, I see that the two of you have already reached the foundation establishment stage. Your talents must be extraordinary. Why didn't you join a sect, and instead became an itinerant cultivator? As she spoke, her eyes seemed to be unable to control themselves, and kept glancing at Chef beside her. We're used to freedom and can't stand being restrained. That's why we became itinerant cultivators. Lone Moon replied. The steward frowned. She seemed to have thought of something and suddenly advised, It's always difficult for itinerant cultivators to cultivate. If the two of you want less trouble, it's better for you to join a sect. With that said, she even gave Shining, who was nibbling on a fruit at the side, a look of reproach. Shining. Meow meow meow. Thank you for the reminder, fellow Daoist. Lone Moon smiled politely. After thinking for a moment, he continued to ask, Oh yes, when we entered the city previously, we saw many mortals fleeing here. They said they encountered the disaster of Fallen Night. Isn't that so? The steward continued, Sigh, it happens a few times every year. The last time it happened was in a border city, thousands of miles away from here. I didn't expect it to come here so quickly. This Fallen Night is so scary. I'm a little curious. Where did it start? Of course it's the corroding vacant abyss, the steward blurted out. She suddenly thought of something and looked at the few of them with a look of surprise. The few of you aren't also here to accept the mission to investigate the corroding vacant abyss, are you? There's such a mission. Lone Moon asked. This was jointly issued by all the big sections. The steward explained, This Fallen Night incident has been a threat for many years. All the sects have been investigating for a long time but have not found the cause. They can only roughly confirm that it has something to do with the corroding vacant abyss. That's why they're calling for everyone to go in and investigate. But the corroding vacant abyss is extremely dangerous. It's very likely that you won't be able to return. That's why all the sects want to go together with itinerant cultivators. Although the rewards are generous, it's really too dangerous inside. Fellow Daoists, please don't take things too hard. Thank you, fellow Daoist. It looked like the darkness came from the corroding vacant abyss. The steward nervously emphasized the danger of the corroding vacant abyss. Seeing that they had no intention of giving up, he sighed and walked away to help them with the registration procedures for itinerant cultivators. He looked at them with a look of pity. Chapter 6:14. I don't lack good food and drinks, and I'm not interested in the same trade. Lone Moon's smile deepened, and he narrowed his eyes. I'm just a little interested in the spirit stones in your storage bags. Why don't you take the initiative and take them out first? The other party's expression darkened, but a female cultivator at the side suddenly laughed. Ha ha ha. Boss, looks like this little beauty doesn't like you. Boss. Why do you have to be so courteous with them? I've never seen such a good-looking man, and one with cultivation. Don't waste it. That's right, I noticed when we just entered the city, they don't belong to any sect or have any backing at all. To be able to dual cultivate with such a beauty, I'd have no regrets even if I died. Boss, if you don't go, we'll go. That's right, boss, that woman over there looks useless, let's take her down first. Lone Moon. What do they mean? He faltered for a moment. The beauties they were talking about, were they talking about him and Chef? In a flash, he vaguely thought of something. Before he could think carefully, the leading female cultivator's expression darkened even more, and she snorted coldly. Humph. I was going to be gentler to you on account of your looks, looks like you're going to have to do the hard way. He suddenly released the suppressive power of a golden core cultivator. Then don't blame me for making a move. With that said, he directly took out a square jade seal, activated his spirit chi, and instantly that Dharma artifact flew up. I want to see who can protect you. With that said, that Dharma artifact flashed, and directly flew towards them. How dare they show off an inferior grade spirit artifact in front of him? Lone Moon's eyes narrowed, and just as he was about to attack, he saw that jade seal suddenly turned to the side, and then with a loud thud, it directly hit Shen Ying's head, who was behind. It even made a clear and deep echo. Lone Moon, who was ready to attack, I Ching, who was completely defenseless, he watched as that heavy seal directly slid down from Shen Ying's forehead, leaving a square mark, and faintly the words, "Spirit-suppressing seal," could be seen. The scene was instantly as quiet as a chicken. Shen Ying, who had been watching calmly from the sidelines, stood expressionlessly on the spot. 1 second passed, 2 seconds passed. Lone Moon suddenly had a bad feeling. Moss. Master. Even Chef called out subconsciously. Suddenly, Shen Ying's hand tightened. The half-eaten fruit was crushed into pieces. In the next moment, a monstrous rage emanated from her body. Although she was expressionless, her entire body seemed to be burning with raging flames. A terrifying aura instantly erupted from her body and swept across the entire small world. For a moment, the earth trembled and the mountains shook. With a series of cracking sounds, the entire world seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure and began to break apart. Cracks immediately appeared on the ground, and even the sky began to distort. The wind raged, and the sun and moon lost their radiance. The entire world was collapsing. F***ck. Lone Moon was shocked. He grabbed hold of the person who was about to go berserk. Shen Ying, calm down, calm down. This is someone else's plane, hey. You can't just casually smash it. Master. I Ching was shocked as well. This has nothing to do with anyone else. Only then did Shen Ying retract her aura, and the surrounding collapse stopped. The 5 female cultivators had long been suppressed by the surrounding suppressive force and could not stand up. Their entire bodies sank into the ground, unable to move. Their faces were filled with shock and confusion. What just happened? Who were they? Where were they? Shen Ying picked up the seal on the ground and walked over step by step. What are you trying to do? Perhaps sensing danger, the female cultivator's eyes widened. She wanted to escape, but she could not move. She could only watch as Shen Ying walked over step by step with the seal in her hand and squatted down beside her. Then she raised the seal, and pressed it hard on the top of her head. Seal, right? Leave a seal, right? I'll let you seal all you want. I'm a melon eater. Don't go crazy, you think I'm putting on a show. With that said, she pressed the seal all over her head and face. In an instant, the 3 words, spirit subduing seal, were deeply imprinted on her face. But Xining did not stop. She directly picked up the spirit sword on the ground beside her and carved a few words herself. Then, she pressed the seal on her entire body. Upon closer inspection, he realized that there was a row of imprints on her body. This meat did not pass inspection, cannot be eaten. Wait. Xining turned and walked towards the other women. She did the same and covered their entire bodies with the seal, especially in the most conspicuous places. Lone Moon quietly glanced at them and realized that the seal was not only on their skin, but also on their souls with a special aura. In other words, unless these people reincarnated, they would carry this failed inspection mark with them for the rest of their lives. No matter how high their cultivation level was in the future, they would not be able to get rid of it. It seemed that the female cultivator's sudden attack just now had really pissed Xining off. Xining covered them for a whole hour before her temper subsided. She returned to her lazy self. She turned and walked back. Then, she stuffed the 5 storage bags in her hands to Father Nyo out of habit. Here. I Ching, Lone Moon, she didn't forget to pick up the loot even when she was angry. He suddenly felt that this daughter could be pampered a little more. Xining continued to take out a fruit and took a bite. Then, thinking of something, she turned and added, I don't like this stepmother. What did she mean? Lone Moon felt that there was something wrong with this world. Whether it was on the spirit boat or when they entered the scattered cultivators' hall. The way the cultivators in this world looked at them gave him a strange feeling. Even their attitude seemed a little too warm. At first, he did not understand what was so strange about it. Until he met the 5 cultivators who robbed him. Their words seemed to reveal something. They were not only here to rob him. Their main goal seemed to be him and Chef. And they even talked about dual cultivation. At first, he thought that they were some kind of fiendish cultivator or demonic woman with special cultivation techniques. But now, it was obvious that they were not. If there was anything in common between these few incidents, holy shit. Lone Moon suddenly reacted. His eyes widened. There are no male cultivators in this world. Whether it was the robbers or the disciples of Dawning Pill sect, they were all women. Not a single man. At first, she thought that Dawning Pill sect was a sect for female cultivators. But later, she saw that all the people in the city were female cultivators. It's not that there aren't any. It might be that there are very few. I Ching thought of this as well. His face turned green. If there really were no male cultivators, when they said they were cultivators, the other party would not just be shocked but suspicious. Wait a minute. If there are so few male cultivators in this world. Judging from the way those people treated him and Chef so well back then, and how they treated Xining who needed their constant reminders, they did not even try to hide their dissatisfaction. Could this place be the world of female supremacy? Xining replied. Lone Moon, I Ching, MMP. Chapter 615. The map distributed by the itinerant cultivator hall pointed to a place called Yaoru City. It was said that that was the only immortal city with a transportation array to the corroding vacant valley. Given Lone Moon and I Ching's speed, they reached that immortal city in a few days. They directly went through the transportation array to the corroding vacant valley. Almost at the instant they stepped out of the array, they felt a cold and gloomy aura hit them in the face. They saw a huge abyss in front of them, as if the sky and earth had suddenly been broken. On one side was still a wasteland, but on the other side was only a bottomless darkness. A thick black aura, like ink, was coming out of it continuously. It was already dark all around them, but the direction of the abyss was so dark that there was not a trace of light. Even when they used their divine perception to probe it, they could not sense any movement. Lone Moon subconsciously frowned. For a moment he could not tell what was inside. At this moment, there was already a dense crowd of cultivators gathered in front of the corroding vacant valley. Most of them were itinerant cultivators, but there were also cultivators from various sects wearing the same school uniform. But everyone was watching from the side, no one directly entered. Lone Moon glanced at them and found that the majority of the crowd were indeed female cultivators. There were only a few male cultivators here and there, but they were either wearing light gauze hats or veils to hide their faces, hiding delicately at the side. Their cultivation levels were even lower, the highest was only at the golden core stage, and most of them were surrounded by a few women standing protectively around them. So when Lone Moon and I Ching walked out of the transportation array openly, they immediately attracted the attention of all the cultivators present. The surroundings were obviously quiet for a moment. At that moment, all the gazes were fixed on them. Some were surprised and puzzled, and some were even probing. There were even people who directly released their divine perception and brazenly swept over them as if they were taking advantage of them. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. This was the first time so many people had brazenly offended him. Instantly, he felt a burst of anger. This F***ed-up world of female supremacy. Subconsciously, he released his suppressive force and returned those presumptuous gazes back one by one. Instantly, a few cultivators' faces turned pale. Then, as if they were frightened, they hurriedly retracted their divine perception, not daring to probe further. Daoist Lone Moon. Suddenly, a pleasantly surprised voice rang out. A person with a sturdy figure, dressed in green clothes, and if it weren't for the extra 2 lumps on her chest, no one would be able to tell that she was a woman. She squeezed out from the crowd and walked quickly toward them with a pleasantly surprised smile on her face. There was a faint trace of excitement in her eyes. His eyes seemed to be shining as he stared intently at Father Nyo, who was at the front. "Why are you guys here too?" The 3 of them were stunned. Who was this person? The woman stared at Lone Moon for a moment. Suddenly, she thought of something and her expression changed. "You're not planning to enter the corroding vacant abyss too, are you?" She frowned and put on a worried expression. She looked around and finally fixed her gaze on Shining, who was at the back. She said disapprovingly, "Fellow Daoist Shin, the corroding vacant abyss is so dangerous. How can we let our 2 fellow Taoists take such a risk?" Shining. "Why is it me again?" "Fellow Daoist Shin, this is your fault," she said righteously. "As a woman, how can you let the man behind you take such a risk? What's more, fellow Daoist Lone Moon is your father. Listen to me and stop fooling around. Hurry back." With that said, she even gave Lone Moon a loving look. Lone Moon instantly felt goosebumps all over his body. Frowning, he said, "We don't know you, fellow Daoist. You don't have to worry about this. I will be careful. Even if I'm careful." She seemed to have thought of something. She paused and asked, "Don't tell me you don't remember me. I'm Lu Lin from the Dan Xia sect. We met on the spirit boat a few days ago." She reminded them slightly disappointedly. The few of them were stunned. Instantly, they remembered the storage bag full of ingredients. Foodie Ying's eyes lit up. She was the first to remember. She blurted out, "Oh. Prepare a stepmother. I Ching, Lone Moon, prepare a stepmother." "What the hell?" Lu Lin nodded excitedly. Yes. That's me." Lone Moon. Son of AB asterisk TCH. Do you think I won't call Shinjing right now? Oh yes, fellow Daoist Lone Moon. Seeing that the few of them remembered, Lu Lin became even more enthusiastic. She stepped forward and looked straight at Lone Moon. She asked nervously, "Did the food from last time suit your taste?" Fellow Daoist Shin said that you like these the most. So these days, I went to various immortal cities to collect some more. I don't know if you like it. As she spoke, she hurriedly took out a storage bag and handed it over with a fawning expression. Lone Moon's expression darkened. He turned and glared at a certain foodie behind him. Damn it! What nonsense did he say to her? The latter silently took a step back. She looked at the sky and the ground, but did not dare to look at his eyes. She pretended not to know anything. Chef, the weather is so good today. A certain brain-dead disciple quickly cooperated and added, Yes, master. The sun didn't even appear in the sky today. Lone Moon, do you think that if you don't admit it, I won't deduct your food expenses? F***CK, fellow Daoist Lone Moon. Seeing that he did not take it, Lu Lin looked confused. No need. Lone Moon's expression darkened. Lu Lin was stunned. Fellow Daoist, haven't you always liked these? I've quit. Can't I? Lu Lin was stumped. Seeing his cold expression, she could only take it back. This. I see. Men are indeed fickle. But fellow Daoist Lone Moon's angry look is also very cute. The more Lu Lin looked at him, the more she liked him. Her eyes were as sticky as superglue, and her face was full of infatuation. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Goosebumps appeared all over his body like mushrooms after spring. This damned world of female supremacy. Let's go, we're going in. He turned and told the two prodigals. I'll settle the score with you when we get in. He was about to fly into the corroding vacant abyss on his sword. Lu Lin, who was staring at them in a daze, finally reacted. Wait, fellow Daoist Lone Moon. Even if you really want to go in, you can't do it now. Ha! Lone Moon turned back. Why? He turned to look at the center of the crowd, then looked at them worriedly. Seeing that they had no intention of giving up on going in, he sighed and said, This corroding vacant abyss is boundless. No one knows what's going on. To prevent everyone from getting lost inside, the sect masters and elders of the various sects are working together to set up a transportation array so that everyone can come back through this array. As he spoke, he pointed to the center of the dense crowd. Lone Moon subconsciously released his divine perception to scan. Indeed, he felt traces of spirit energy fluctuations in that direction. He turned to look at Chef. It's the 5-spirit transportation array. I Ching also discovered that array. He directly transmitted his voice. In this small world, as long as there's spirit chi, we can come back by activating the array. It was just that this array consumed too much energy for cultivators in the lower realm. Even high-level cultivators could only maintain it for a month at most. Lone Moon took a closer look. Indeed, there were a few soul formation cultivators in the center of the crowd. You guys should have the waste tokens of itinerant cultivators, right? Lu Lin continued. Later, when the array is activated, the waste token will automatically mark your aura. When you want to come out, just activate the waste token. Lone Moon thought of the waste token he received a few days ago at the itinerant cultivator hole. He thought it was just an identity token for itinerant cultivators. So it had this function. No wonder these people gathered here but did not go in. They were waiting for the array to be completed. Thank you for the reminder, fellow Daoist. Although this array was of no use to the three of them, Lone Moon still thanked her out of habit. You're welcome. Lu Lin blushed. She looked at him with misty eyes again. Motherf asterisk cur. The array is activated. Someone shouted. Indeed, in the next moment, a blinding white light suddenly appeared in the center of the crowd. In the next moment, a huge transportation array appeared beneath everyone's feet. Lone Moon looked down at the waste token in his hand. Then, he turned to Chef and Shining and said, "Let's go in." With that said, he did not stay. He directly flew up on his sword and followed the crowd into the thicker darkness of the corroding vacant abyss. Putting aside the strange situation here, just the fact that there were so many sects that had fallen here made it seem like a very good mystic realm to pick up loot from. Although so many years have passed, the terrain here is no longer the same as it was before. But having a map is always better than just barging in. Lu Lin persuaded him even more seriously. So, fellow Taoist Lone Moon, why don't you join us? His expression darkened, and he changed his mind instantly. This was not their plane. Although they were managers, their powers were limited. Even if they released their divine perception, they couldn't fully explore this place. Since someone was taking the initiative to lead the way, there was naturally no reason for him to reject. Thus, his attitude became much gentler. He even habitually put on a businesslike smile and said with a kind expression, "Then I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Lu." He even cupped his fists politely, but found that the other party didn't react at all. She froze on the spot. Ha! Fellow Taoist Lu. Taoist Lu. Wait, holy shit. Why is your nose bleeding? Asterisk 2 asterisk The two of them narrowed their eyes in tacit understanding and turned to look over. Your sister. He clearly didn't do anything. All he did was smile. Keep your ambiguous wavy lines away. Senior Sister Lu, are you done? The tens of Dawning Pill sect disciples waiting on the spot saw that Lu Lin had not returned after a long time. They could not help but urge her from afar. They also couldn't help but look curiously at Lone Moon and Yi Qing. The stunned Lu Lin finally reacted. Her face turned red, and she hurriedly lowered her head to wipe away the blood from her nose. Then, she turned and said, "Coming." She smiled foolishly and led the three of them toward the people of Dawning Pill's sect. She first brought them to meet the Uncle Master who was leading the group, then briefly introduced the three of them. Lone Moon took a closer look. The leader of Dawning Pill's sect was a late-stage nascent-souled female cultivator. The rest of the disciples were mostly golden core cultivators. Perhaps because Lu Lin had informed them beforehand, the nascent soul cultivator did not object to their joining. She even nodded in a friendly manner. Instead, the other disciples turned around curiously. Their gazes were fixed on Lone Moon and Yi Qing. The fire in their eyes was no different from Lu Lin's. Lone Moon's expression stiffened. He felt goosebumps all over his body. Suddenly, he regretted agreeing to go with them. At the side, Yi Qing's expression turned cold. Then, he directly turned sideways and decisively hugged Shining who was nibbling on a fruit. He lowered his body and called out in a low voice, "Master." Shining was stunned for a moment. Then, she immediately understood. Very cooperatively, she gave him a kiss on the cheek. Seal. Instantly, the gazes that were fixed on him darkened. Then, they all turned to look at Lone Moon. Lone Moon. Son of AB *TCH. Single dogs have no human rights. Serves them right to be their shield. Since everyone is here, let's go. In the end, it was the older nascent soul female cultivator who said this. Only then did everyone retract their gazes that seemed as if they wanted to skin him alive. But along the way, they still turned back to glance at him from time to time. There were even many disciples who deliberately slowed down the speed of their flying swords and came over to say a few words. So fellow Taoist is called Lone Moon. One look and I can tell that you are a good family man. Oh yes, I am called asterisk asterisk. Fellow Taoist, you really look like the friend of my Uncle Master's niece from the sect next door. Fellow Taoist, are you interested in joining our Dawning Pill sect? I think you are very suitable to be my little junior brother. The most adorable kind. Fellow Taoist, how old are you? Where do you live? Who are you? Are you married? Fellow Taoist, the corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He silently recited the Clear Heart Sutra several times before he managed to maintain his composure and did not turn hostile. Logically speaking, he had been quite popular since he was young. The number of love letters he had received was at least a few dozen kilograms. He was already used to being confessed to and pursued by girls in public. But those were a group of soft and fragrant girls, all right. Not this group of girls in front of him. They were about the same height as him and had fierce faces. They stared at him from time to time and drooled. Apart from their slightly protruding chests, they were more manly than a man. Suddenly, he felt that the group of invincible sect Barbies were more pleasing to the eye than them. At least they were normal usually. These people only gave him the illusion that he was being forced to be gay. What's more, he was the one at the bottom. Father Nyo, calm down. Seeing that he was about to explode, Shining could not help but pat his shoulder. Father Nyo, just get used to it. Chef added. He glared back at them. How could he get used to it? If you have the ability, don't hug each other. Asterisk asterisk, fellow Taoist Lone Moon, do you want some water? Do you want some fruits or pastries? Lu Lin, who had been lazing at the side, could not help but be attentive. She dug out her storage bag, but her eyes were still fixed on Lone Moon, looking obsessed. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He glanced at the master and disciple who were eating fruits and watching the show. He only felt that a certain string in his mind snapped. He took a deep breath and suddenly smiled brightly. Shining, I've thought it through. I don't mind being your second wife. Damn it, I definitely cannot be the only one who is blind. Shining, Lu Lin, swoosh. A certain someone had already pulled out his long sword. Chapter 617. Ever since Lone Moon said that, everyone's imaginations went wild, imagining a drama of the century. Almost immediately, all the gazes on him turned to Shining. It was different from the adoration from before. Now, there was anger, blame, disdain, and indignation in the eyes of a certain someone who played with people's hearts. If not for the fact that they were in the corroding vacant valley, they would have made a move already. Lu Lin's reaction was even greater. Her face was pale and she looked sad and hopeless. She could not even control her sword steadily. She looked at the two of them and muttered to herself, I guessed long ago that you two were not father and daughter. So, you two. Instantly, the way the others looked at Shining began to burn with boundless murderous intent. Two words were written in every pair of eyes, beast. Not satisfied with one, she still wanted to seduce the other. Shining, who was rarely tricked. Son of AB*TCH. Suddenly, she felt that the fruit was no longer fragrant. She turned to look at a certain father who suddenly felt refreshed. Shining, why bother? We were born of the same root, why rush to kill each other? Lone Moon, fellow Taoist would rather die than me. This is what you get for cheating me. I Ching, indeed, everyone wants to snatch my master away from me. Draw your sword, little bitch. We're here. The nascent soul cultivator leading the group suddenly stopped and looked around. It was still pitch black. A trace of doubt flashed across her eyes. Strange, this should be the ruins of the sacred medicine sect. Why is there nothing here? Why is it so desolate? She took out a piece of the map in the shape of a jade slip and examined it carefully. As if she had confirmed something, she turned to look at the disciples and said in a deep voice, "We've arrived. Everyone, go down and take a look around. Be careful and don't go too far. This could be the source of the Fallen Night outbreak. Remember to be careful." "Yes, Uncle Master." Everyone cupped their fists in response and flew down one by one. Lone Moon and the other two hurriedly flew down as well. Lu Lin hesitated for a moment. Although she was sad, she still followed them worriedly. From Lu Lin's ramblings along the way, they understood that this darkness was very likely to have erupted from the fallen sects in this area. This place was obviously one of them. The moment they landed, Lone Moon and I Ching released their divine perception and scanned the surrounding area. However, he still couldn't find anything. There was nothing around him, but the darkness seemed to be deeper than the entrance. Since their divine senses didn't work, they could only look around with the other disciples. 3. Fellow Taoists. Lu Lin gritted her teeth and quickly caught up to him. Don't go too far. It's easy to get lost here. They nodded, found a direction, and walked away. However, after searching for a long time, they didn't find anything. Shining, did you see anything? Lone Moon turned to a certain cheat. Shining took a bite of her fruit and answered slowly, there should be, soon. Ah. What did he mean by, very soon? Martial uncle. I found it. Before he could react, a cultivator suddenly exclaimed from behind him. Lone Moon and Chef exchanged a look and picked up Shining. In a flash, they headed in the direction of the voice. They saw a female cultivator from the Dawning Pill sect standing not far away. She said excitedly, I found it. I found the ruins of the sacred medicine sect. A moment later, the female nascent soul cultivator who was leading the group also came over. Where? Here. Here. She turned and pointed in front of her excitedly. Lone Moon subconsciously looked over. He hadn't noticed before, but now that he looked closely, he realized that not far to the right of the female cultivator, there was a tall wall. The wall was pitch black and irregular. It looked like half of it had collapsed. It looked like a dilapidated mountain gate. The sacred medicine sect is indeed here. The nascent soul cultivator leading the group was overjoyed. She walked forward excitedly. Everyone, let's go in first. The other cultivators followed. After all, it was a large sect in the past. There might be something good there. Lone Moon also subconsciously released his divine perception to scan the broken wall. He could vaguely feel that there were all kinds of talisman characters carved on it. They looked old and very simple. They also had a special aura of life, as if they were alive. Wait. That's not a wall. Alarmed, he reacted immediately. He waved a wind spell toward the group in front of him. It wrapped around the people who were about to cross the black wall and pulled them back. They were not prepared at all. Before they could react, they fell to the ground, including the nascent soul female cultivator. Fellow Taoist Lone Moon, what are you? Everyone looked confused. They were just about to ask when they suddenly heard a loud roar. That sound was very ear-piercing. Instantly, everyone felt a strong gust of wind sweeping toward them. It carried with it a huge suppressive force. Several golden core cultivators were directly blown away and smashed into the ground. They saw that the originally motionless wall in front of them began to shake. The ground suddenly shook violently. The entire ground was cracking, as if something was about to dig its way out. "Get on your swords and leave this place," the nascent soul cultivator shouted. "It's coming out." Only then did everyone react. One by one, they flew up on their swords. Shening and the others did the same. Following a series of loud rumbling sounds, everyone then saw a lump of black stuff emerging from the ground. It was as huge as a building. It looked like a liquid and had no specific shape. It was completely black, but from time to time, something that looked like characters flashed across its body. There was even a sawtooth-like horn on its head. It was the wall that they had mistaken earlier. "What? What is this?" one of the cultivators exclaimed. In the next moment, they saw that lump of black stuff move. In an instant, it turned into a huge black demon beast. It had 4 legs and 6 wings. Its body was also covered in purple flames. Lone Moon immediately recognized that it was an 11th level demon beast. He blurted out, "Isn't this the purple flame beast?" He had never heard of a demon beast that could turn into a liquid. "No." Shen Ying's eyes narrowed. Suddenly, she said, "It's a Jinli." "What?" Lone Moon was stunned. He subconsciously asked, "What Jinli? Why have I never heard of such a demon beast?" "It's not a demon beast. It's so big. If it's not a demon beast, what could it be?" He stopped mid-sentence. He suddenly thought of something. Wait. Jinli. Why did these 2 words sound so familiar? They seemed to have seen it somewhere before. Jinli. Jinli, Jinli. Lone Moon was shocked. The spatial creature, Jinli. Yes. Shening nodded. Holy shit. Didn't it sound familiar? Back then, in the assistant's information that he had been studying for more than 3 months, there was a special chapter on this creature. It was a shapeless creature that only lived in the cracks of the plane, Jinli. Suddenly, he felt that those cultivators who had come in with him and now had no idea where they were going to die. Chapter 6:18. Like the Beast of Chaos, Spatially was a creature that moved outside the plane space. Under normal circumstances, it could not enter the plane, only when there was a crack in the plane or when there was a plane storm. Moreover, Spatially was formless and had its own space attribute. Even if it invaded the plane, it was difficult to detect its whereabouts except for the manager. To deal with such a creature, not to mention these golden core and nascent soul cultivators, even immortals would be eaten. Step back. The leading nascent soul cultivator suddenly shouted, "This is a purple flame beast, remember not to be burned by its flames." The other party obviously thought that Spatially was an ordinary 11th level demon beast, conjuring a seal with his hands to trap it. The other disciples also took out their weapons and prepared for battle, looking as if they were ready to fight. Lone Moon's heart sank, and he was about to remind them. Lu Lin suddenly came out and blocked in front of them, saying, "Fellow Daoist Lone Moon, you guys quickly step back, don't get close, this is an 11th level demon beast, you are only at the foundation establishment stage and you are men, you can't block its purple flames." The 11th level was equivalent to the early stage of soul formation. Although dangerous, there were 4 nascent soul cultivators in their team, and so many golden core cultivators, it was not impossible. With that said, she gripped the sword in her hand tightly, blocking in front of them, saying, "Don't act rashly, we will protect you, don't go too far away from me." With that said, she also gave a look to the few female cultivators beside her, who hurriedly moved over, as if intentionally blocking Lone Moon and I Ching behind them, with the attitude of protectors. Lone Moon, Ching, before he could explain, the other side had already started, only to see the leading nascent soul female cultivator directly set up a huge array. The white array light fell towards the giant beast in the middle. It looked like it was about to trap it. Shit! Don't use the array. Before Lone Moon could finish, the demon beast suddenly roared loudly, just lifting its claws lightly. That array directly passed through as if it was non-existent. The leading female cultivator was shocked. Before she could react, she only felt a bone-piercing chill sweeping over, as if there was a huge aura rushing over. Immediately, all the spirit energy in her body dissipated, her body became unstable, and she was directly sent flying. Lone Moon summoned a wind spell and caught the man in the air, but he was already unconscious. Spatial creatures had the ability to travel through space, so how could they be trapped by an array formation? In the blink of an eye, they had lost a nascent soul cultivator. Everyone's faces paled as they realized that this was no ordinary demonic beast. The other nascent soul cultivator reacted and shouted, "Let's go. Leave this place." Everyone was stunned. Only then did they fly up on their swords. Lu Lin also turned subconsciously, intending to pull Lone Moon back. "Fellow Daoist, hurry, out of the way." Before she could finish speaking, Lone Moon suddenly acted first. He grabbed her and threw her towards the female cultivator behind him. The fan in his hand instantly turned into a long sword. He turned back and instructed, "Shining, look after them." "Oh." Shining took out a new fruit and answered. "Chef, I'll leave the left side to you. Don't let it escape." With that said, his figure flashed and he flew out. Chef also disappeared from where he was. In the next moment, an oppressive sword wind swept over. Everyone felt their bodies become unsteady. By the time they reacted, everyone had already been blown behind Shining. Shocking sword chi shot up into the sky. A sky full of white sword rain appeared. Every sword made of spirit chi seemed to come to life. They directly fell towards the huge beast below. That huge beast let out a sharp and piercing scream. It was instantly minced into pieces. The purple flame beast immediately scattered into balls of black wriggling liquid. But in an instant, it was reborn again. And it transformed into a new shape. This time, it was a huge Lingyun immortal beast. "Chef, don't give it a chance to reform." Lone Moon reminded again. Spatially had spatial attributes. Once it recovered, it could cut open space and escape to other small worlds. The most effective way was to chase it out of the plane. I Ching responded. The sword moves in his hands became more concentrated. The sword chi in the air also became stronger. Even the cultivators who he deliberately avoided felt an unstoppable pressure. For a moment, their legs felt weak. Lu Lin and her fellow disciples were all stunned. This sword chi. This pressure. It was not at the foundation establishment stage at all. Even nascent soul, no, even soul formation cultivators did not have such terrifying sword chi. She turned to look at Shining, who was the only one calmly eating a fruit. She could not help but ask, "Fellow Daoist Shin, fellow Daoist Lone Moon and the others, what cultivation level are they at?" "Ha!" Shining was stunned. She tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then she said, maybe a little more powerful than a god." "Lu Lin, everyone, are you *King kidding me?" Lu Lin did not believe her words. She thought that she was just joking. She looked at the two people in the air again. At this time, Lone Moon had already stopped attacking. He turned and directly opened the exit of this plane. Suddenly, a blinding white light appeared in the pitch-black sky. The heaven and earth seemed to be torn open. An unfamiliar aura that did not belong to this plane came from inside. Lone Moon gave I Ching a look, indicating for him to rush the spatially over. The spatially was a creature that did not belong to this world. Chapter 6:19. Lu Lin turned back to look at the huge beast in her hand, only to see that the extremely arrogant unknown demon beast was now starting to sway in waves, as if it was trembling. Shining! Lone Moon suddenly shouted, still in the air. What are you waiting for? Hurry and throw it over. This was not their plane, the door could not be opened for too long. Oh! Shining responded, only to hear a crisp crack. She suddenly twisted the hand holding the horn to the side, instantly breaking the black horn into two. Ow! Spatially immediately let out a scream, as if it was in extreme pain but had to desperately suppress it. The waves on its body swayed even more, turning into two streams of water, pitifully covering the broken horn. So painful, so painful. But it could not roll, it would die. But Shining directly picked up the half-broken horn, raised her hand and threw it towards the white exit in the air. The spatially trembled, turned around subconsciously and rushed out of the door after its own horn. Horn. My horn. In the next moment, it disappeared in the white light. Lone Moon changed the spell in his hand, directly sealing the opening. The white light disappeared instantly, everything returned to pitch black. Only then did the two fly back. There's actually a spatially here. Lone Moon frowned. Logically speaking, as long as the manager was here, creatures like the spatially that lived in the cracks of space could not invade the plane. Back then, their plane did not have a manager, God Fiend and the others did not let a single one in. Is Chao Kun already this weak? Only then could the spatially break into the plane. I think it's not because of him. I Ching replied. He lowered his head to look at Shen Ying's hand and turned to retrieve a white silk handkerchief. He pulled her hand up and wiped it out of habit until the unknown black substance was all over Shen Ying's hand. As he did so, he conjured a dirt removal spell and said, "This kind of invading creature is not strong." He was able to break through the plane to seek help previously. He can't be so weak that he can't even withstand the spatial separation. Could it be that someone let it in? Lone Moon said subconsciously. The next moment he was stunned, exchanged a look with Chef. Both of them thought of the same person at the same time. The intruder who injured Chao Kun. Was he the one who let the spatially in? But, why? A small boss like spatially was indeed a disaster to the beings of the three realms, but to a manager, it was a piece of cake. It was not as difficult to deal with as spatial storms or planar rifts. 3. Seniors. Lu Lin looked at the three of them with a complicated expression, but she did not dare to address them as fellow Taoists anymore. Even the way she looked at Lone Moon changed from the way she looked at him just now to one of respect. Although she didn't know what they were talking about, she felt that it wasn't something she could understand. Thus, he cupped his fists and bowed politely. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Lone Moon frowned and turned around. No. She hurriedly shook her head, then pointed to the front, and said with some apprehension, "It's in front, in the direction where the monster appeared, there seems to be something." Lone Moon paused and turned to look, only to see that the originally empty space suddenly shook, as if a curtain had been lifted. A large number of palaces began to appear, vaguely looking like a large sect. It's the Sacred Medicine sect. Someone exclaimed, subconsciously wanting to go forward, but because of Lone Moon and the other two, he did not move, only looking at them questioningly. It seemed like this place was previously hidden in another space because of the spatially. Now that the spatially was gone, it was naturally released. These cultivators were all here in search of opportunities. This sacred medicine sect was originally everyone's destination. Lone Moon was not interested in this, so naturally he did not stop them. After using his divine perception to check that there was no danger, he allowed them to enter. Everyone's faces lit up, and they all bowed politely to them, then flew into the palace, completely changing their previous desire to win the hearts of women, completely treating them like unreachable seniors. Chef, on the other hand, scanned the palace that suddenly appeared, and subconsciously asked, "Father Nyo, don't you think this palace, it's too complete?" Lone Moon finished, frowning even more deeply. He looked up at the mountain gate in front of them, where the words Sacred Medicine Sect hung high. According to Lu Lin, this Eraton abyss had been here for many years. However, the Sacred Medicine Sect was far too well preserved. It didn't look like it had been destroyed in the past. "Let's look around," Lone Moon instructed, and the few of them flew up on their swords, patrolling the entire sect a few times. Apart from the lack of any living aura, they still did not find anything. Instead, the cultivators of Dawning Pill sect came back with a large pile of things. Because this sect was well preserved, the things were very easy to find. They were all piled up in the storeroom. "Senior, we found the heritage of the Sacred Medicine sect in the Dharma depository." A female cultivator handed over a storage bag, looking like she was about to hand it over, not at all wanting to keep it for herself. Even the other female cultivators did the same, all of them coming over as soon as they found something. Lone Moon hesitated. These people were really honest, so he shook his head and said, "What you found is yours. We don't need these." "This." The cultivator looked troubled. "But it's all thanks to you that we found the Sacred Medicine sect. By right, these things should belong to him." Chapter 620. A transparent barrier suddenly appeared at the mountain gate, and a large amount of ghost chi swarmed out from it, instantly sweeping across the entire sect. For a moment, the temperature plummeted, and it was as cold as ice. Shrill, ear-piercing ghost cries came from within. The ghost chi of the netherworld was different from ordinary ones. It was a place that only allowed souls to exist. Naturally, it had the power to absorb souls. The cultivators who had not even cultivated immortal bodies naturally could not withstand it. Almost in an instant, apart from Shining and the other two, everyone's divine souls began to become unstable. They looked confused. Some golden core cultivators even had signs of their souls leaving their bodies. Lone Moon's expression darkened. He immediately flew over. With a wave of his hand, a sealing array sealed the entire mountain gate. The ghost cries stopped. Everyone's eyes gradually became clear. However, their divine souls were still unstable. The few nascent soul cultivators were still fine, but the other golden core cultivators could not stand still and started to vomit blood. "Say, Senior." Lu Lin managed to stabilize her primordial spirit. She looked up at the people in front of her in confusion. The other cultivators also looked confused. What was that just now? Lone Moon's expression darkened. He scanned the crowd and said, "This is not something you can handle. Leave this place." With that said, he conjured a seal with one hand. Instantly, everyone's jade token floated up. He tightened his grip and everyone's jade token was crushed. In the next moment, he activated the large-scale transportation array outside the corroding vacant valley. "Say." Before Lu Lin could even speak, all the Dawning Pill sect cultivators had already been teleported out, instantly clearing the area. I Ching flew over with Shining in his arms. He looked up at the mountain gate that was already emitting dense ghost chi. He frowned and said, "This is a realm gate." Lone Moon nodded. Naturally, he also saw the problem. This should be the realm gate to the underworld. And it looked like it had been here for a long time. The human world has its own original source to guide souls. Why did they purposely open a gate to the underworld? If it was the immortal and divine worlds, it could be said that there was a problem. But the living beings in the human world could not withstand the ghost chi of the underworld. Moreover, after they died, they would naturally enter the underworld. What was the point of opening a gate here? And they purposely used the spatial separation to hide it. It looks like we'll only know the answer to this question after we enter the underworld. Lone Moon pointed at the mountain gate in front of them. Without hesitation, I Ching set up a defensive array around them before walking towards the realm gate. In the next moment, they arrived in another world. Only then did he see that a person suddenly appeared behind him, her whole body surrounded by layers of black original source chi, with a cold and gloomy aura. From the figure, he could tell that it was a woman. More importantly, her body also had the aura of a manager, just that it was not very strong. You are the person who invaded this plane. Lone Moon's heart sank. Not daring to let his guard down, he directly summoned his long sword. Invasion. The woman suddenly began to laugh maniacally, looking at the few of them even more fiercely. Is that what Chao Kun told you? To me, you are the real invaders. Suddenly, she waved her hand, and the originally calm original source below began to surge, instantly turning into numerous streams of water that directly attacked them, as if thousands of invisible giant hands were attacking them. Lone Moon released his divine perception, and as he dodged the attacks around him, he waved his sword, intending to counterattack. Suddenly, his body froze, the god power that was originally circulating freely seemed to be suppressed, unable to circulate. No. Not just their god power, even their power as managers seemed to be suppressed by something. It was the thing that had seeped into their bodies just now. Suddenly, they remembered that when they first entered the underworld, the aura that followed them like a shadow seemed to be the black original source chi below. That aura seemed to be suppressing their power. You invaders, all of you deserve to die. The woman's voice was cold, and a huge aura exploded from her body. The original source below churned even more violently, directly forming a huge wave, looking like it was about to drown the few of them. Lone Moon gripped the sword in his hand tightly, turned back and reminded, the original source here can suppress our power. Chef, use your sword chi. I Ching nodded, directly releasing a sky full of sword chi. Countless sword lights appeared, forming an airtight net, just as the huge wave was about to be blocked. Suddenly, a white light flashed in front of them, a familiar figure cut through the void, appearing in front of the huge wave. With a backhand, he conjured a Dharma spell that they had never seen before. Suddenly, green light shone, directly dispersing the huge black wave. Chao Kun. Lone Moon hesitated. The person who came was manager Chao Kun, who had fainted under the plane tree previously. Quite timely. Chapter 621. My lords, are you all right? Chao Kun looked at the three of them anxiously after he destroyed the source. Lone Moon frowned and glanced at the worried Chao Kun. After a while, he nodded and said, I'm fine. That's good. He heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to say something, the black source beneath him started to churn even more violently. Chao Kun. The eyes of the woman in black instantly turned red. She glared at Chao Kun, and the hatred in her eyes seemed to be overflowing. The black aura around her became thicker, and she directly rushed towards him. You deserve to die. Chao Kun was shocked. He instinctively summoned a barrier in front of him. The green light bounced back, and the black around the woman dissipated a little. Chao Kun's expression darkened. He waved his sword at the woman and turned to the three of them. Thank you for your help. I was able to find this intruder. This place is too dangerous. In order to avoid being affected by the polluted source, please return quickly. He looked at the woman anxiously and said, only I can completely purify the source of this plane. Leave the rest to me. The three of them exchanged a look but did not speak. My lords, please leave quickly. Don't worry about me. Chao Kun continued in a low voice. No matter what, I will protect my own plane. With that said, he did not wait for their reply. He charged out with his sword and fought with the black-robed woman. The two of them moved extremely fast. In an instant, only two shadows, one black and one green, were left in the air. Chao Kun was right. If they wanted this plane to recover, they had to restore the source to its original state. But the plane's source was the foundation of the plane. No one else could interfere with it. Only a spirit seed or a manager could change the source. Lone Moon and I Ching were managers of other planes. Not only could they not control the source here, it even suppressed their powers. So apart from Chao Kun himself, no one else could interfere. Of course, a cheat like Shining was an exception. The two of them fought more and more intensely. Chao Kun was already injured. Now that he had lost control of the source, although he was not too badly injured, he was still at a disadvantage. However, this battle still had some effect. At the very least, circles of green origin chi appeared around his body. He was trying to restore this plane step by step, but such efforts were like a drop in the bucket for the origin that had been completely dyed black. After a short while, Chao Kun could no longer hold on. Master, I Ching turned to look at Shining and spoke hesitantly. Leave or stay? Lone Moon nudged Shining and asked, aren't we going to help? Shining took a few bites of her fruit and said slowly, there's no hurry. Lone Moon and Chef exchanged a look. They seemed to have thought of something. Their eyes narrowed, but they did not move. But compared to before, Mu Xiang's attacks were even more ferocious. She was simply fighting with no regard for her life. She seemed to have been provoked by something. Every attack was a desperate attack. It was as if she wanted to kill the other party even at the risk of getting injured. I Ching frowned. This kind of fighting style was a little too impatient. It gave the opponent a chance to breathe. On the other hand, Chao Kun fought very calmly from beginning to end. The green light around his body also became brighter and brighter. Even the center of the original source that stretched as far as the eye could see slowly emitted spots of green light, and slowly pushed forward in all directions. But this speed was still too slow. Chao Kun would eventually run out of energy. After all, the entire original source was almost controlled by the opponent. Unless someone helped to restrain Mu Xiang and let him focus on returning the original source. Of course, this person had better be a manager. Lone Moon raised his brows and turned to look at Shining purposely. Are we going to continue watching? Shining turned back to look at him. She finished the fruit in her hand and took out a plate of pastries. It's not time yet. A hint of understanding flashed across Lone Moon's eyes. He directly kept his sword. All right. Up to you. With that said, he snatched the plate from her hand and watched the show in peace. Shining, master, I have some here. Chef at the side hurriedly replenished. On the other side, the two fought even more intensely. All around them were the sounds of various spells colliding. Chao Kun's body was already covered in blood. His movements were also slowing down. It seemed like he could not hold on for much longer. So he looked over expectantly. But the three on this side did not seem to receive his pleading gaze at all. They stood at the side with no intention of coming over to help. Instead, Mu Xiang fought more and more fiercely. Although she was also seriously injured by Chao Kun, her movements did not slow down at all. Seeing that Chao Kun was about to be unable to hold on any longer, he turned back to look at the three in the distance. Gritting his teeth, he seemed to have made up his mind about something. He used all his strength to wave a palm to force the other party to retreat. He turned and flew down towards the original source below. He directly fell into the only green spot in the center that had recovered. Almost at the instant he landed, he directly threw out a Dharma artifact and began to conjure a spell. For a moment, the pitch-black underworld seemed to be split open. A blinding green light lit up. Chao Kun, how dare you? Mu Xiang was shocked. Her entire person seemed to break down. She rushed over crazily, but was repelled by that green light. Yet she climbed up again. As she rushed over even more crazily, she shouted, Chao Kun! Chao Kun! Chao Kun! Each cry was more shrill than the one before. It's okay now. Shining, who had finished 3 plates of pastries, suddenly stood up. Lone Moon, why don't you freaking eat dinner before going? Winky face. Chapter 622. The green light grew brighter and brighter, the light around the Dharma artifact became even more dazzling, even the originally pitch-black underworld seemed to be dyed, quickly turning back to green. Mu Xiang's expression became uglier and uglier, as though she wanted to rush past that Dharma artifact crazily, but she couldn't reach it no matter what. Instead, she was covered in cuts and bruises from the impact of that green original source. Stop! Stop! She gritted her teeth, mobilized all the black original source around her, and rushed over without a care. Chao Kun's expression darkened, instantly conjured several spirit swords, taking the opportunity to attack. Mu Xiang ignored the opponent's attack, stretched out her bloody hand, and instead sped up, risking the danger of being stabbed, and was about to reach that Dharma artifact. But another hand reached out from the side, and picked it up first. A figure suddenly appeared in the middle, and at the same time, the spirit swords conjured by Chao Kun seemed to have encountered some obstruction, and directly dissipated. Shining glanced at the little green ball in her hand, her eyes narrowed, and her palm tightened. Instantly, that soaring green light on the ball dimmed, even the green original source that was continuously changing below stopped, as though the pause button had been pressed. Moss. Madam. Chao Kun was stunned, and looked at Shining in disbelief. Why are you doing this? Instead, Mu Xiang reacted first, without the suppression of that green light, the black aura around her rose sharply, as though she was in a killing frenzy, and without thinking, she directly raised her sword and slashed towards Shining, who was closest to her. These invaders all deserve to die. Master. I Ching, who was a step slower, was shocked. Just as he was about to attack, he saw Shining suddenly stretch out a finger, and with a series of cracking sounds, the sword in the other party's hand broke inch by inch, and before it could even touch the other party's palm, it had already turned into ashes. Mu Xiang could not retract her momentum in time and could only watch as that finger poked all the way to her forehead. For a moment, the energy around her dispersed, and could no longer condense, the black aura also directly dispersed, revealing her original figure. Her heart sank, and she raised her hand, wanting to continue attacking, but she could not exert any strength, and could only wave her empty fists and hit forward. Unfortunately, she was shorter than Shining. She was blocked by Shinying's finger on her forehead. Her arms were not long enough to hit Shining. She could only draw circles on one side. The scene suddenly became comical. In an instant, it went from a high-end King's game between managers to a Bronze's game between kids. Why don't you tell them how you came to this plane, and how you snatched this plane from my hands step by step? snatched the plane. The three of them were stunned. They turned to look at Chao Kun. So Mu Xiang was the original manager of this plane. No wonder she had the aura of a manager on her. They originally thought that she was the same as the person who invaded Chef's plane. She used to be a manager of another plane. They didn't expect her to be from this plane. But Chao Kun was indeed a manager. How could there be two managers in one plane? A hint of panic flashed across Chao Kun's eyes. He hurriedly retorted, "This is the choice of the world's consciousness. This plane chose me." Bullsh *T. The anger in Mu Xiang's eyes intensified. She glared at him, as if she wanted to swallow him alive. "Do you think I can't tell? You came here to obtain the ability of a manager. But you don't have the right to be recognized by the world's consciousness. That's why you killed all the living beings in this world and forcefully changed the original source. If not for that, how could you become a manager?" Chao Kun's face darkened. The murderous aura around him intensified. He retorted directly, "Don't forget that the one who destroyed the world and was reborn was you." "Shut up." Mu Xiang's eyes turned red instantly. "You still have the cheek to mention the destruction of the world. It was you who opened the plane door and let those invaders from the Big Tao organization in to destroy as they pleased. You made me think that the plane was close to collapse. That was why I was in such a hurry to retrieve the original source. All the living beings in the world were born from the original source. Retrieving the original source was equivalent to destroying the world." Chapter 623. You can't even stop an invader, you're not qualified to be a manager at all. Chao Kun's gaze turned colder, as if he had found his courage. The more he spoke, the more confident he became. "This plane being in your hands is the real disaster for the living beings in this world. I just made the most correct choice." "You're talking nonsense." Mu Xiang's aura was unstable. She wanted to rush out of the sword array but was blocked again. "Chao Kun, it's clearly you who made this plane full of holes, the living beings in misery and suffering, and even caused me to drift in chaos for so many years. You've never cared about this plane. In your eyes, it's just a tool from start to end." "Utter nonsense." He snorted, his gaze darkening. "I thought you were just impulsive at that time. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn. How many living beings in this world will die because they can't withstand the forceful conversion of the original source this time? This plane has already been destroyed by you once, now you want it to be destroyed a second time. It's clearly you who's distorting the truth." Mu Xiang was anxious. She started to frantically rush out of the sword array. "Three sirs." Chao Kun turned to look at Lone Moon and the others. He directly cupped his fists and said, "This is a feud between me and her, no matter who's right or wrong. It has nothing to do with the living beings in this world. I can stop being a manager, but I definitely can't let her continue to convert the original source. I hope that the three of you will not fall into her trap on the account of these living beings." Lone Moon glanced at Chao Kun, who was full of worry. Hearing this, he finally understood something, which meant that Mu Xiang was indeed the manager of this plane. It was just that she was later replaced by Chao Kun. This replacement method was not very honorable. It was obvious that the previous Big Tao organization also had a hand in it. That was why the other party had such a huge hatred towards him. But the conversion of the original source would indeed have a huge impact on the living beings. That fallen night, they heard in the small world previously was the impact brought about by the original source, those who died because they couldn't withstand the conversion of the original source. And those who became blue-skinned, it was the same, it was just the extent of the impact. If this continued, when the original source of this plane completely turned black, the impact would be even greater. But, Lone Moon laughed. It had to be said that Chao Kun was a very smart person, even if the secret of his plot to seize the plane was discovered. He also knew what was best for him. Just look at what he was saying now. He was worried about the survival of the plane, worried about the living beings of the world, and said such righteous words. She sized her up and hesitated for a while before saying, I don't know who that person is. But he was indeed the one who opened the sealed plane and helped me come back. What does that person look like? I don't know. She shook her head. His ability far exceeds that of a manager. I couldn't see his face at all. He just suddenly appeared in the chaos. He said that he would help me seek justice. Then he sent me back here. And then, after he told me how to change the original source, he disappeared. She seemed to think of something she could not understand. She frowned and said, I never saw him again after that. I see. Shen Ying's eyes narrowed. She took a step forward and directly stuffed the little green ball in her hand into her hand. Thank you. Mu Xiang was stunned. Her eyes widened. She looked at the green ball in her hand in disbelief. You, milord. Chao Kuen's face turned pale instantly. Shen Ying did not stop. She directly turned and opened the plane gate. As she walked, she said, I'm so hungry. Chef, Father Niu is going home to eat. Yes, master. No problem, master. Lone Moon glanced at the two of them. He also directly followed in. The moment the plane gate closed, they could still faintly hear the sounds of fighting coming from behind. But this time, Chao Kuen was probably dead. Chao Kuen. It's time to settle the grudge of the plane.